mic working okay? Yes. All right. I'd like to call to order the February 7th, 2021 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. If you could please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who is here with us this evening, as well as those of you who are viewing remotely via Zoom or via CNET. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session on Friday, February 4th regarding student discipline, and an executive session prior to this meeting regarding personnel, student discipline, and a legal matter. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda as presented? All right, Dr. O'Donnell now will review some of the housekeeping items related to our hybrid format.
Thank you. For our audience this evening, 30 minutes will be provided at the beginning of the meeting for public comment for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during our next meeting. Each individual will be limited to comments of up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by school code. This approach also allows for comments to be informed by the presentation and board's discussion of the respective item. Since this is a public meeting, we will not permit remarks regarding individual students. If you'd like to share something with our board about an individual student or students, please email that to the board. During tonight's meeting, the IT help desk is available if those viewing remotely encounter technical difficulties, and you may email them at itsupport@scasd.org or call 814-231-7743. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. I'd like to now call on our board secretary for a roll call of board members.
Dr. Anderson.
Here.
Dr. Bader.
Here.
Ms. Brandt.
Here.
Dr. Buck.
Here.
Ms. Concepcion.
Here.
Dr. Crevecore.
Here.
Dr. Duffy.
Here.
Ms. Zidney.
Here. Okay, thank you. At this time, we have the superintendent's update. Dr. O'Donnell?
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Luke to the table, but I don't think he...
You can sit right here, Luke. Yep.
Oh, yeah. Come and join us. Yeah.
Welcome, Luke.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. I'd also like to appreciate board members for your service. January was Board Appreciation Month. Had an opportunity to appreciate the board during a board development session, and I just want to publicly thank them for their commitment to our community and our school district, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to start off with something related to Brennan Copenhaver. And a couple weeks ago, I had an opportunity to meet with the Copenhaver family and welcome the two younger sons back to school, as well as all of their closest friends. And my role was to address a couple sensitive topics with them that they wanted to talk with me about, as well as set the stage for them to collaborate with our integrated mental health team. And I just want to say on behalf of our school community, we need to remain focused on taking care of those kids. It also includes several professionals in the community collaborating with us, and I just want everybody to know that it's been a tough few weeks in the high school. And I also like to thank all of their teachers for collaborating with our integrated mental health team and continuing to support those students. Second item here on the update, and this is posted to your agenda, relates to safety at State High. And last week we had a student assault in our high school tied to a racist and anti-Semitic photo. The photo, which was taken in the school months ago, contained racist language and a symbol of hate and anti-Semitism. So, we were absolutely not aware of the photo that was taken in the school. Not one faculty member or administrator was aware of that until after the assault. Under no circumstances will we tolerate violence, racism, or anti-Semitism in our schools. Any individuals committing such acts will be held accountable. I also want to share that as a school district, we also integrate an educational plan with every student who violates our code of conduct because our core mission relates to their future success. It's our standard practice. In addition to holding students accountable for their actions, it includes a restorative approach that provides opportunities for students to repair harm caused. And that's a collaborative approach with families. I'm not going to get into any specifics, but I think that's important to say as we work with young people. And if we're not going to do it, who is? So as we continue moving forward from the troubling actions in the high school, we will, work toward further preventing acts of bias and hate and to improve our school climate. The high school faculty and principals were working this morning before school, as well as they have some plans to work directly with students so that student voice is a critical part of how that climate moves forward. I'm not proud of what transpired, but we have to help support the students and work forward. I'm going to move on and just share a little bit about our pandemic update. Since our last update, as you've seen with Nabil's new update, cases have been easy to see how they're steadily declining. We continue to talk to the health and safety team and on a weekly basis, and what they're seeing in regard to the communities, and we ask them for their advice about possible change to our protocols. Since we've been seeing decreases, we've been discussing certain mitigation measures that we can ease. I mentioned a couple things in the memo there, including water fountains and something we're doing for the high school prom. As for masking indoors, the team discussed this, but doesn't feel we're ready to make that shift at this point. Our concerns center on maintaining in-person learning and for as many students as possible, especially immunocompromised kids. And also having sufficient staffing in our buildings and supporting our employees that are immunocompromised. So if the trend continues downward, we'll consider looking at easing mitigation efforts, and I just wanted to share that. And the people advising us do represent our two largest healthcare providers in our community. Lastly, I'd like to recognize Mr. Jason Ammerman. I don't think anybody in the room knows who this person is, and I haven't met him yet myself. He's a substitute van driver for us. And last week, he performed an act of heroism. Due to the sensitivity of what occurred with an individual student, I'm not able to tell the whole story. However, I can say that we had a student who was in grave danger. Fortunately, Jason acted quickly to move our student out of harm's way. Jason's actions were truly heroic, and I can't thank him enough for his bravery, clear thinking, and willingness to respond swiftly during the incident. On behalf of our board, our district, we're going to be paying a visit to Jason in the near future. He's a very busy person, and driving van is just a side job for him. So if we're able to get him here to a board meeting to meet you, we'll absolutely do that. The board's apprised of what I'm talking about, and it's pretty remarkable. So thank you, Jason. That's all I have, and I'll gladly field questions. I know we have several members of our team here, and we have several sensitive items here that I just touched on.
Yeah. So, questions from the board? Okay. All right. Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell.
You're welcome.
Okay. The next item is our legislative update. Jackie is not here. I think, Dan, did Jackie send her legislative update to you?
Yeah, I have some things to share.
Okay.
Jackie left a list of 5 or 6 items that I think are relevant to our experience as board members and to the work of local school districts. The first of these related to a finding or a report that the state government committee has approved HR 2093, which would prevent potential school board candidates from cross-filing in primary elections. This bill, should it pass, would result in Pennsylvania becoming the only state in the nation that would follow a partisan school board primary process, which is very concerning, to say the least. Governor Wolf last week signed Senate Bill 324, which ensures that students who are experiencing homelessness or are in foster care receive services to help them toward a timely high school graduation. And thirdly, under consideration by the House Government Committee is House Bill 955, which will allow districts to advertise and notify the public of meetings in ways other than by a standard printed newspaper, which is remarkable in this technology, but is an important step. But apparently legislators are split on this issue. Jackie reports. Senate Bill 527 has passed out of the Senate Education Committee and would expand the education government, the Education Improvement Tax Credit, or the EITC as it's known, as well as the Opportunity Scholarship Tax Credit. These programs allow the individuals who contribute funds to private schools to claim a tax credit for up to 90% of the donated amount. A recent study by the Independent Fiscal Office found that this program has inadequate oversight. It fails to collect any performance data that might determine if these programs actually work. Senate Bill 527 also seeks to increase the amount of allowed tax credits into the future. Any year that where at least 90% of the funds are claimed, the ceiling would be automatically increased the following year. And this really represents a means by which the taxpayers' funds are distributed to private schools rather than to the public schools, and therefore short changes or undermines our capacity to fund the public schools. Number 5, Senate Democrats, I apologize for my throat. Senate Democrats have announced a $3.75 billion education spending blueprint ahead of the budget season. Their proposal would send $1.1 billion to the fair funding formula. Excuse me. $750 million to the Level Up program, $1.1 billion for toxic school remediation, and then additional monies for staffing and recruitment, as well as mental health support and academic support. Lastly, the education fair funding trial, which Jackie has shared with us and discussed with us, is continuing in the Commonwealth Court of Pennsylvania. In late February, the prosecution completed calling witnesses, and now defense witnesses are taking the stand. The trial can be expected to last several more weeks. And an important announcement relates to Governor Wolf's budget address, which will occur tomorrow, Tuesday, February 8th. So that's what I have.
Thank you, Dan. Carlene, do you have legislative items from the national level?
No, not really.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Council of Governments report. Gretchen and Peter, do you have an update on the COG?
Yeah, I have one item, and I believe Peter has 3. So there was a Public Safety Committee meeting from the COG on January 11th, and the 2 items I think that the SCASD community would want to know about are, one, that several of you might remember that there was a planned emergency management COG training and exercise with SCASD for the emergency plan, and that got postponed because of COVID. And that will take place as a full-scale exercise in 2023. So Sean Kaufman from COG Emergency Management is already in the works planning that, and that will occur next year. And the second thing is not, from the Public Safety Committee meeting, is not directly related to SCASD, but I thought that the SCASD community would want to be aware, which is that the Atherton Street Road construction project will continue, as you probably all are aware of, for the past several years. This is like a decade-long project, and it will continue this spring and summer. I believe now they're going to be right in the middle of State College Borough, so throughout the summer. And then Peter, I believe, has some items as well.
I do. Thank you very much. So on January 24th, I attended the Center Region Council of Governments General Forum. Rich Frank, who's the College Township Council Chair, was elected the chair of the Council of Governments. All the newly elected and re-elected officials returned, and one of them is in the audience tonight. Congratulations. Mount Nittany Medical Center provided an update on their operations under COVID, and while they have been strained, they are not diverting patients at this time. I don't have his name right in front of me, but the director who spoke with us did encourage everyone to observe good protocols and encouraged all citizens to get vaccinated and boosted, which is much in line with what we have heard here from our own health and safety team. That evening, they also approved budgeting for a slide for Welsh Pool, and there are about 115 or so days until the pool's open, everybody, so get ready.
Yay.
Let's see, they appointed Danelle Del Corso to the Solar Power Purchase Agreement Working Group as the Council of Governments representative. She is a former board member from Half Moon Township, knows the project well, and I think provides some continuity there since I have left that position. On January 26th, the Solar Power Purchase Agreement Working Group met. We elected Gretchen Brandt to be our chair, and Jason Grotini from the State College Borough Water Authority as the vice chair. We have set up a basic meeting schedule. I think the most important thing for folks to know is that the project management team, which deals directly with the energy services consultant, has set up a weekly meeting. That meeting is run by our own finance director, Randy Brown. Finally, the Center Region Park and Rec Authority held its monthly meeting. Kathy Madison from College Township was elected chair, Bill Keogh from Ferguson Township as the vice chair. You all probably know that the active guide is out. Parents, if you didn't sign up for your park and rec activities last Friday, you might be out of luck because they fill up pretty quick. Let me see. I think something that's important to know was that the field requests in the area, as many SCASD parents know, coaches know, our own athletic staff know, is that the demand for rectangular fields continues to go up. And the chair, Ms. Madison, noted that this really shows how important the Whitehall Road Regional Park is to meeting that capacity as an intergovernmental, intermunicipal operation. Certainly, the kids from our district are going to enjoy it quite a bit. So I think that those are all the updates that I have. If there are any questions, you can direct them to me. Oh, there's one other thing, there was a parent who's a COG General Forum representative who his son was friends with Mr. Copenhaver, and he wanted to implore to us that we make sure that we do everything that we can to make sure that kids know that help is available. And it was, I think, for everyone in the general forum, just like as it was earlier when Dr. O'Donnell was giving when you said the words that you did, it was...
She was there when I met.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it was, well, this was on Bob Strauss, and Bob Strauss' son, I guess, knew him, and anyway, they also asked that we do everything that we can to make sure that our kids are taken care of. That's all, thank you.
I had one more.
Okay.
Which is just a reminder that, and I've been trying to figure out the date, but early bird pool passes for the pools, because Peter was talking about the pools, and I thought a lot of SCASD families would probably want to get a reminder, is soon. I can't find the date here, but I would buy your pool pass on a snow day, because that will save you some money for the early bird. It's
Thank
coming
you.
up soon.
Okay, thanks. And on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome Luke Sharoff. He's our student representative for this marking period, so welcome to the board, and feel free to get in touch with us if you have any questions on board agendas, and to raise your hand anytime you have something to contribute. So,
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for being
I
here with us.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time on the agenda, we have time for public comment. And as Dr. O'Donnell indicated earlier, each individual is limited to comments of up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. And for action items, we will have public comment prior to voting on each item as required by school code. If additional time beyond the 30 minutes allotted for public comment is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed. It's So is anyone here who would like to, anyone here in person who would like to make a public comment? And then I will open the floor as well to those on Zoom. Yes, if you'd like to come up to the microphone, you can introduce yourself, where you reside in the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, can you hear me through my mask?
I sure can.
Okay, my name is Michelle Schilberg. The glasses are foggy. I live in Port Matilla, community member and a parent. I think that we can all agree that safety of our students and staff members should be our #1 priority. I am concerned and need answers as to why there were no adults in the hallway or classroom when students were present. Isn't there a policy to staff each hallway with adult supervision when students are in session? I was emotionally affected by the severity of the attack and believe we are extremely lucky that we did not lose another SCASD student. I saw a young lady just minding her business, going to class. And then I also saw others escalating the situation. Both students involved need to get help with managing their anger, but not at the expense of our students' safety and their right to get a great education. I don't want to pull my student from SCASD School District because of its inability to protect them. But SCASD's focus on divisive policies have not helped the racial tensions in our community, and I believe has even aggravated the issue. We need to shift resources to bringing our students together. We need to focus on our future together, not the mistakes from the past. We need to provide students with many opportunities to build relationships together for the good of SCASD. We should offer more free programs for all to play sports, join clubs, band, to attend events, and really focus on our community as a whole. Our kids are hurting, we're hurting. And your policies and focus are at a minimum part of the problem. Babies are born unbiased. We as adults have to stop this divide. The time to come together is now. Our children are precious, each child, including these 2 young men. They deserve better. One adult present in the hallway could have diffused the whole situation. There is increasing evidence that the SCASD policies are not improving racial tolerance within the student body. While I fully appreciate that it takes time to change culture, what is the board and the administration doing today to ensure that our students are safe? If the school is not safe, nothing else matters. And I usually like to come after a complaint with a solution. And I think one idea to help calm the student body right now during these trying times is to invite parents and community members to help monitor and support student activities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments. If someone else would like to come speak, Tina, I see your hand raised. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us where you reside in the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Sure. Do you want my name and what else did you want?
Name and where you reside in the district.
Where I reside.
Yep.
So Tina Hennessy, I reside on Cornwall Road in State College. So first I want to say thank you to, in particular, Superintendent O'Donnell for the update about both the support for the students who are most affected by what happened to Brandon Copenhagen, but also for the work that you're doing specifically to address climate in high school. I really came out tonight to voice my support for the work the district is doing to address issues of equity, belonging, and inclusion in our schools. Dr. Chatters is an important leader in this work. She's amazing, and she's a valued addition to our district and our community. This work is important for our community and for our students. I think there's broad agreement that there is no excuse for violence. There's also no excuse for racism and intolerance. These issues negatively affect our students and our learning community. All of our students are children of this community, deserving of the best education and learning environment we can provide, even those who make mistakes or do something wrong. The research and evidence affirms that work to address issues of equity and to move toward restorative justice reduces violence in schools over the long term. We know that. We must stay the course, even when it's hard, and maybe especially when it's hard. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Okay, Stephen, if you'd like to come up. And if you could, again, just introduce yourself and let us know where you reside in the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
I'd like to request 5 minutes.
No, thank you. You'll have 3 minutes,
Thank you.
thanks.
My name is Steve Williamson. I live in College Township. I did not have the opportunity to attend the last board meeting, but after listening to the portion with the health and safety team, I remain extremely concerned about this group and the district's use of it. There was not a single question asked about natural immunity. You have continued to act as if it means nothing, and I think we should get explanations as to why. This board needs to care about the long-term impact on children and allow parents to have the freedom to do what is best. There also is not a single question about masking related to education. The district is limiting student education by masking. The comment by Dr. Ferrari that mask is always better than no mask addresses only one part of the child's risk, and that risk is almost non-existent. There are future consequences that he is not accounting for and has refused to account for over the past 17 months. Did you know that the UK, Ireland, Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Germany, Switzerland, Poland, Hungary, Australia, New Zealand do not have mask mandates for schools? 3 others don't mask their primary grades. They appear to understand the consequences of long-term masking. This district's health and safety team does not. You have chosen to blindly follow the CDC and the DOH recommendations, which, by the way, have often been inaccurate. They also differ from the WHO and other countries' national health bodies. The CDC is not invested in my child's future. If they were invested, they would never recommend to close schools without evidence, like you did last year. If they were, they would be advocating a healthy lifestyle for children over getting shot up with experimental drugs. In the fall of 2020, I specifically asked why was there no full risk assessment being done and why a team of qualified individuals not being assembled on the health and safety team that could do just that. Dr. O'Donnell has continually said that he is comfortable with the team he has assembled. Why are we still comfortable with that statement, even after all the mistakes? Anyone paying attention knows the team and process followed is severely flawed, and the reason is they are short-sighted. They and Dr. O'Donnell have traded short-term fixes with little regard to long-term consequences. Many parents of this district spoke loud and clear about keeping kids in school last year, and you didn't want to listen because apparently the opinion of 3 individuals was all that mattered. And we championed mental health last year, and look where we are now. When you are guided by fear, you have no regard for the future. My point is that the health and safety team has shown little interest in doing what is right for our kids long term. You have continually chosen to mandate short-term, short-sighted, controversial policies without clear evidence. You have chosen these policies without regard to the future, and now your only recourse is to ask for more money and more resources to fix the problems you created. Lastly, Dr. O'Donnell and board members, please explain to the community what a mask optional situation looks like. Is there a plan? You've had 10 months to come up with one. Hundreds of other schools in the state have mask optional policies, and they're doing just fine. Thousands of school districts across the country have mask optional policies, and they're doing just fine. Plenty of other countries around the world that the U.S. is compared to educationally have mask optional policies, and they're doing just fine. What's the threshold? What's your plan? Why is there no transparency? How long are you going to be short-sighted?
That's
a
3 minutes,
mask-free
sir.
child sitting at their desk
That's 3 minutes, sir.
doing work
That's 3
isn't
minutes, sir.
a danger to society.
That's 3 minutes, sir. Yeah, thank you for your comments. Is anyone else here who would like to make a public comment? Yes, Lorraine, if you'd like to come up to the microphone and you could introduce yourself and where you reside in the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes as well. Thank you.
Hi, you hear?
I can hear you, yeah.
Hi, my name is Lorraine Jones. I reside in Ferguson Township. I'm here on behalf of the State College NAACP. I'm here on behalf of families that were involved in the incident, the fight that happened at school. A simple fist fight that resulted in a child being charged with assault. I'm outraged with it. I've had many conversations over the years with all of you on the board. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm outraged. We are sick and tired of asking for our students' dignity, respect, and humanity at this school district. We need to get serious in these disingenuous efforts that have been made for the school district. We need to get real. We need to get really deep and rip off the Band-Aid and really talk about the real issues that's going on. We cannot have students being charged, a child being charged with assault. This is not the first time that we've been here. We've provided resources, we've provided testimonies, we've done documentation, documentaries, everything, and yet we're still here. We have got to change what we're doing. It is not working. It is unacceptable for a child to be charged with an assault. It's unacceptable. We need to listen. These kids are feeling hopeless. They feel hopeless. They feel that no one is listening to him. Okay? This kid marched around for 5 months with a Nazi sign and the N-word on him, and nothing was done. If you didn't know, shame on you. If you did know, shame on you. It is your responsibility to keep these students safe. They should not have to go through this. They should not have to feel like they are hopeless. This is hopeless. It's no more. We are not asking nicely anymore for our kids' dignity, respect, and humanity. We are demanding it, and you are responsible for it. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Hi, is anyone else here who, yes, if you'd like to come up to the microphone, you can introduce yourself, where you reside in the district, and then you'll also have 3 minutes.
Hi, I am Tierra Williams. I reside in Ferguson Township, and I am the chair of the 320 Coalition. It's with great sadness that I stand before you tonight to discuss the altercation that took place last Tuesday to start off Black History Month. And we're only the 7th day in, and I have to stand here before you today. And this situation was a big blow to our community. For the sake of this conversation and to protect identities, I will just refer to the youth as the Black boy and the white boy. The coalition has never advocated for violence of any kind, and we stand against racism and white supremacy. We believe the school did fail both of these students. We are faced with a situation that has now fallen into the hands of the State College Police Department instead of the principal's office. Let me just say this: a reaction to racism is natural. We are not talking about adults, though. We are talking about male children whose prefrontal cortex, the decision-making part of the brain, isn't even fully developed until approximately the age 26. According to various sources within the community, it is to our understanding that the white boy was a quote-unquote known racist, that he has not only been heard using the N-word, but has been seen using swastikas.
I'm sorry, ma'am. If we could not, please not refer to individual students at this time for confidentiality reasons.
You guys they were saying names. What do you mean? Confidentiality.
Can you stop the clock? If you're going to interrupt her, stop.
I just think that's interesting. Somebody got up here and said the child's name, and you're saying that I can't.
What I'm just saying is, please be careful about what we're sharing in regard to individuals.
You just said Brandon.
Yeah, I'm not,
What do you
we can
mean?
restart
You
the
didn't hear
clock,
that?
don't worry about the, what I'm saying is just to please be careful what you're sharing in regard to individual students.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll say this then. Are you going to roll the clock back, or what are we going to do now?
Yeah, I don't have,
Since you guys
it was stopped, so.
Okay, so how about this then? It's been known that this child has been using racist comments. I don't know what else to say, how else to say that. And if you guys didn't know, just as my colleague said before, you shame on you all. And even during this encounter that is on video, he was caught using the N-word. So it's not really, I don't know what we're trying to figure out. My question is, where was the administration in all of this? And why did it come to a student becoming so fed up with the racist antics that he and his fellow classmates had to circumvent to the boy's final response? The Black boy's final response ended up being physical. After months, at least 30 days of being harassed and racially intimidated. How long is he expected to deal with racial bullying before a teacher or the administration stepped in? Free speech is not equivalent to hate speech, and there is no room for this kind of rhetoric in an institute for learning. One individual can't do this work alone. It is incumbent upon the administration to hold themselves, the teachers, and the students accountable. Although some circumstances might warrant it, the 320 Coalition has no desire to see any human being locked up in a cage. We believe in restorative and equal justice. This is a prime example, though, of the school-to-prison pipeline where Black youth are criminalized more often than their white counterparts. So I have to ask the other question. Why are we treating the white boy like a child and the Black boy like a man? Both students should have received a maximum of 5 days out of school suspension and then required to go through some sort of mediation or conference. However, that's not the case. Instead, one child is left with scars and the other child could be spending time behind bars. If we're going to start charging our youth instead of doing some type of racial healing and reckoning, then the white boy should be charged with ethnic intimidation and harassment according to the section 2710 Title 18 and 2709 Title 18. And it is extremely racist not to take all these aspects and charge the black student with the crime, while the white
Ma'am,
student's record stays
we're at the
clean.
3-minute mark.
It is
but I do would
unreasonable
like
for
to-
a fist
I'm
fight
sorry,
to
ma'am.
result in a felony. Well, actually,
I'm
you
sorry.
interrupt me, and we don't know when you started to roll the time back, and I timed this, so I know it's 3 minutes. I wouldn't come up here and disrupt
Ma'am,
you like that.
I'm sorry. I want to, there's a point of clarity, please. that
Okay.
Our school district does not charge students whatsoever. That's not a function of the school district, so.
No, the school district is the one who referred it, correct?
No, ma'am.
No.
No?
No, ma'am.
Any, I'll follow up with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just
Well-
gonna say, not according to
Sorry.
Chief Gardner, who I spoke with today.
Ma'am, I'm sorry.
So what are we talking about here?
We can follow up with this. Well, I think we can clarify a bit.
I mean, you're
in the
asking me
public
questions. Do you want me
comment
to answer them, or are you talking at me? I'm not really understanding what's happening. You interrupted
I'm
me,
sorry,
and now
I-
you're talking at me. What do we want to do here?
Yeah. I'd like to move on to the next public comment because we're at our 3-minute point, but we can address some of that concern at the end of public comment.
Oh, okay.
Because
Okay,
we don't
do
usually kind of go back and forth, or we try not to.
that. Okay, well, I'm gonna say my last line then. It is
Well-
unreasonable for a fist fight to result in a felony. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is anyone else here who would like to make a public comment? Okay, then I'm going to go ahead and look at the Zoom. I see Jennifer Money, I see your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and then you'll also have 3 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Money, and I reside in Ferguson Township. As a local taxpayer and parent, I want to express my concern about the school district. After the recent attack at the school, I think it's fair to say that something is very broken here, and this goes well beyond that one incident. Because while parents may have been surprised, horrified, and shocked, I dare say none of the students were. Learning achievements are down, depression is up, suicides are tragically up, race-motivated crimes are up. Why? This cannot solely be blamed on COVID, and something must be done. This is a school. These kids are supposed to be learning. The point is education, preparing these students for their next steps in life by providing the fundamentals of pure education. Right now, there are things getting in the way of real learning. Agendas, conflicts, politics, funding source demands, crime, buzzwords, COVID mitigation efforts. These are things you must act on for the students' sake. We have students who are afraid for their physical safety due to recent threats. We have students who feel their beliefs are threatened when agendas are taught instead of course content. We have students who feel disenfranchised because they live in rural areas of the district. We have students who are vaccinated or naturally immune and not sick with COVID-19, but are still forced to mask. Where is the sense in all this? We now have a school where COVID case counts are lower than they have been in a while. After looking at the encouraging trend of declining COVID-19 case counts, could you please remove the mandatory mask requirements? Every student still wishing to wear a mask may still do so. It is a mitigation effort that has served its purpose and can now be dismissed. Students will no longer be able to hide behind their masks as they bully, harass, or intimidate fellow students. Seeing faces will provide a level of accountability for students that we currently do not have. The time has come because these kids are being led down a very dark path and something needs to change. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Ellen Freeman, I see your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, then you'll also have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm Ellen Freeman. I live in Patton Township. I have a granddaughter living with me that's going to Park Forest Elementary School. And recently I was very upset to hear about the altercation that happened at the high school. And I feel like friends of mine that are people of color have been telling the school district for a long, long time that there is issues with people bullying them. And I think it's very sad that their thoughts and feelings are being ignored, and it had to come to this point where somebody had to lash out at some racist person. And I think that it's unfair for him to be having the consequences that he has when he has been bullied for so long and nothing was done about it. I'm definitely for what Tiara has said and Lorraine has said, and I feel the same way they do. I'm very angry and upset, and I really hope something is finally done. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Terry Watson, I see your hand raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself and where you reside in the district, then you'll also have 3 minutes to speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. My name is Terry Watson, and I reside in Patton Township. And I have a son that goes to the high school as well. Today, I'm speaking on behalf of Community and Campus and Unity, also known as CCU. We would like the State College Area School District to consider the following when addressing the incident that took place last week between students at the State College Area High School. One, acknowledge the responsibility of the school administration, parents, and adults to set an example of addressing differences and conflict through civil discourse. Your letters to parents calls for students to be upstanders rather than bystanders. Well, what example are we providing for our children to emulate? If adults do not discuss our differences civilly, how can we expect our children to do the same? Second, we must ensure that we are here for our students, and any action taken should benefit and educate all students. The educational environment is about learning, exploring, and discovering. We want everyone to be safe, healthy, and mentally supported. We must recognize the impact harassment and intimidation imposes on the safety and health of our educational structure. We must demonstrate how this incident provides all the members of SCASD community the opportunity to practice respect, civility, and restorative justice as a way to reflect and implement SCASD values. We would like to see SCASD administration and board members utilize the tools and training they have received by using mediation and restorative justice practices as a course of correction. In addition, we want to make sure that all SCASD admin staff and board members are involved in a conversation about racial bias, anti-Semitism, intimidation, bullying, and community building. We want a response that reflect our school district's policies and measures enacted for accountability. We believe that mediation, transparency, and restorative justice provides an opportunity for the entire SCASD community to foster change in behavior in order to cultivate an environment of healing, inclusiveness, and reconciliation rather than of more divisive and resentment. CCU plans on continuing and contributing to this conversation to better our community and ensure that our children have a place to learn where they can feel safe, feel like they belong, and be free from harassment, harm, and trauma. And that's the message from CCU. And with my rest of my seconds, I want to say that I really hope that we are hearing what's being said by my fellow folks, Sierra and Lorraine and Ellen, that this is a problem that has been going on just a little bit too long and needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks for your comments. Okay, I see Lori Moraldi has a hand raised. If you'd like to unmute yourself and then introduce yourself and where you reside in the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, hello. My name is Lori Moraldi. I am in Ferguson Township, and it's my understanding that the school did not recommend criminal charges in the case of the altercation at the high school. If this is the case, and I appreciate the fact that it was stated that there will be clarification on that. If that's the case, I support how the administration has addressed the incident with suspensions and follow-up requirements that align with a restorative justice approach. It's vital and important that our school district not contribute to the school to prison pipeline that's pervasive in our educational system in this country. As a parent in the district, I feel in this particular incident, am proud of our administration, including Dr. Chatters, for following a more challenging and effortful, yet more effective path towards restorative justice in our schools. Furthermore, I support the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that Dr. Chatters has been leading in our district. This work has not created new divisions in our school community, as many of the folks tonight have mentioned. These divisions have already existed. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have illuminated these existing divisions, and we cannot improve unless we see our problems. It's vital that we acknowledge our issues as a community so we can work to do better. Ignoring problems is never an effective strategy for lasting positive change. Improving the equity and belonging in our district is not quick or easy work, and it's work that takes long-term commitment by our entire community. And I hope that we will all take part in that work to improve our community. Thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Leslie Lang, I see your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself and where you reside in the district, then you'll also have 3 minutes to speak.
Yes, can you hear me now? It looks
Yes,
like the counter is off.
I can hear you.
Okay, the counter says 57 seconds. My name is Leslie Lang. I'm a state high senior mom. I live in Ferguson Township, and I've been a resident for 15 years. I'm involved with the school district as well as many of the organizations represented today. I appreciate the continued efforts for transparency and accountability as it pertains to addressing the issues that arise within the school district. And I thank you, the board, for hearing these comments and addressing them. This evening, I'm expressing my concern pertaining to the state high fight between 2 male students last week. I certainly hope that the district will enhance their level of advocacy to do whatever is necessary to ensure that the lives of the 2 minors are not lost in the criminal justice system when the situation could have been handled without prosecution. I do not condone violence, and I would hope that the SCASD community would not use a single offense to destroy the lives of any of our 16-year-old children. We need to promote healing, connection, and belonging. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is everyone's job. We all want the school environment to be free from harassment, free from harm, and free from traumatic events. We want all of our children to thrive, and we all play a role in raising and educating our children. It takes a village. It takes daily actions and commitment from the board, from the administration, from the teachers, from the staff, from the students, and from the parents to ensure that we have a safe learning community for our children. I appreciate the 3 mail emails that were coming from the high school pertaining to the situation, and it prompts me to ask the board, are you prepared to activate the restorative justice circles that you have been trained to execute at all levels? You can no longer delay the implementation of regular practice within the school district, and our community needs to address the context for all these altercations, as well as the systemic causes that fuel the bias, the hate speech, the disrespectful behaviors, the unrest, and the violation of the school policies. So I leave you with the questions: what steps will the board take to ensure that the policies and procedures around equity are being implemented? And how will the board, and will you review the number of fights reported? And what makes this one any different? And will you address your role in delaying actions or failure to follow through on your recent resolutions, the hiring practices, and the curricular changes that you have promised? Will you improve the promotion of your efforts and what you've tried? And will you tell us what's working? And will you be transparent in asking your marketing and communications team to send out announcements quarterly or monthly pertaining to these very important issues? Your letters and your parents have called for upstanders rather than bystanders, and we need to look at the examples that we are providing and the practice for our children to emulate. The recent suicide, the ongoing racial trauma and tensions, the daily microaggressions, make what efforts you can to address these to restore the mental health and wellness concerning those at the high school. I will respectfully also submit those questions to the email of the board for response. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, is there anyone else attending via Zoom who would like to make a comment? Okay, anyone else who's here? Yes. Oh, and I see one more on Zoom, but I'll let you should go first. Yep.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Leslie, I echo what Leslie says. She always says it much better than I am able to. I'd also quickly just like to reiterate what has been said.
Oh, I'm sorry, if you could just introduce yourself and where you reside first. I'm sorry.
Jennifer D. Cheeker, I live in Patton Township. And again, I'm also here to support the work of Dr. Chatters and others in the school district to promote a more supportive, respectful, and inclusive school environment for all of our children through her work, her diversity, equity, inclusion work. And again, this recent incident in school reiterates why this work is so important and only supports efforts to create an environment of belonging for all students. As parents, we want solutions that create accountability, but also move us forward in a way that treats our students respectfully, both as human beings, but also as the children that they are. Most importantly, as adults, we are responsible for creating the environment they learn in. We feel like that this situation, we want them to learn from the lessons of restorative justice so that it benefits all of those involved. And again, this effort, I understand that this approach takes time and effort, but we are willing to wait because we have shown that it works to be effective. Again, I thank you for your consideration. I also, as a side note, also appreciate the time and the effort. I know it's been a lot in the work that you have done to keep our students in school through the pandemic. Has been extremely important, and I really do appreciate that it has been such a great effort on your part to make that happen for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Okay, I see a hand raised by Evan Higgins. If you would like to introduce yourself, where you reside in the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Evan Higgins. I reside in the borough, and I just think that I have a number of thoughts. I mean, number one, it's outrageous that this student would be allowed to, if someone's has a swastika or is saying the N-word, that this could be in any way allowed. It's completely ridiculous. And also that's violence. A number of people have said they don't support violence, blah, blah, blah. And I take that to mean they don't support someone fighting someone who has a swastika. But to be clear, it's not, I mean, I think the opinion needs to be voiced. It is okay to physically hurt someone who has a swastika, who's saying the N-word. That is morally right. If someone is saying the N-word to people, if someone has a swastika, that's violence. And to use violence against them is only responding. And someone absolutely deserves to get beaten up as badly as possible, in my opinion, if that's what they're doing. And also the idea that it's completely crazy that this person would be criminally charged with a felony for this. It's insane. And also for the school to say, well, we don't recommend charges or whatever. You have cops in the school. You have cops in the school. You need to remove cops from the school. If you don't do that, you can't make any claim that you're not supporting the cops or you're not supporting criminal charges. You're doing propaganda for the cops if you have them in the school, and you're doing the work of the cops if you have them in the school. It's completely outrageous. It's white supremacist to have cops in the school. It's insane. And so, I just think the whole situation is absolutely ridiculous. If students coming to school with swastikas, they're saying the N-word, they should be expelled. And it's on the school district that you didn't do that. And it's your fault that this Black student faces their life being potentially derailed in a huge way. It's your fault for not taking action to prevent this from happening. And you allow police officers to sit in the school. You are complicit in all the violence that those police officers and that criminal justice system carries out. And so it's co-signing the violence of the criminal justice system to allow cops to be in the school. So get rid of the cops from the school, get rid of the students who are being openly racist, and this student needs to be protected at all costs. The Black student, to be clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments. We've had, I think, more than half, have we had it reach half an hour of public comment? Has anybody noticed? Because it's we've had about 8:05 people, so. Yeah, so probably then, yes, that makes sense. Thank you. So for everyone else who's waiting to make a public comment, if time permits at the end of the agenda, we may be able to reopen public comment. It might depend on how late it is at that time. Dr. O'Donnell, would you be able to just answer for the board the role that police officers in the school play in regard to whether or not someone is charged with a crime, and the role of the school district is not being an entity that charges?
So for all altercations in the high school, our principals do an investigation and respond utilizing our code of conduct. The police document each altercation that happens in the high school, and then decisions regarding charges, and that includes the school resource officer documenting if there is an assault or altercation in the school. That doesn't, he's not involved with determining charges. That includes whether victims want to press charges in collaboration with the police department. We're not involved in any decision-making, or our investigation is not what they utilize to make their decisions. So I just want to be clear about that. And obviously, if we didn't have Officer Aston in the high school, then another officer would do the investigation. And I think John does that discreetly with his conversations with students, and then he documents that it happened. But he's not involved in arrests of our students, if that were to happen. So I just want to share that's how that works.
Thank you.
And should we also reiterate that the consequences for students, are not public? We cannot make comments about differences between what consequences.
Or even what
students-
consequences any.
Correct. I mean, we can
individual
refer to our
student has.
handbook as to what are potential consequences, but we can't speak to anything about what individual students receive as a consequence.
Right.
And that's, an issue regarding student privacy.
Yeah, because as people mentioned,
So-
they are children. And
Okay, at this time on the agenda, we have routine approvals. I'd like a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
Brant, so moved.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion regarding the routine approvals?
I had one question.
No? Okay. Any public comment on the routine?
I have a
Oh, I'm
Laurel.
sorry, Laurel.
Sorry. I was trying to get it up here. It involved the physical plant routine approvals.
Okay.
And there is one that is for items at Coral Street, and I'm wondering if those were new with the renovation or if they preceded the renovation.
It was new with the renovation.
Because that seems, do we get any, that was not that long ago to be replacing all of them.
No, but it's too long ago to go back to the contractor or the manufacturer.
Okay. I just been wondering about it.
We would look into that, and those would have expired by now.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Peter?
Yeah, in the Finance and Audit Committee meeting minutes, it says LEED Gold or Platinum, and it's spelled LEAD lowercase, and it should be capital L, capital E, capital E, capital D, and that's an acronym for leadership and engineering or energy and environmental design. So it's an acronym, and I just didn't want that to be mistaken in those minutes, that's all.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion? Okay. All right, then, any public comment in regard to the routine approvals? Okay, then we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Moving forward to action items, item A on the agenda is a motion to approve the 2022-2023 academic calendar, and this is shown in attachment 6A.
Brant, so moved.
Second.
Okay, that has been moved and seconded. Are there questions or discussion on this item? Peter, you look like you were about to.
Well, I think we need to, well, Peter's looking in my direction. We both discussed the action item previously, and what we were distinguishing was this particular proposal versus a proposal that was presented earlier at the January 6th meeting regarding the calendar, regarding the academic calendar. And just for purposes of clarification, this particular motion that you're offering, and I'll just ask this question, is this is the first proposal that was offered by the administration in early December.
Yeah, this is the administration's recommendation for the academic calendar.
Right, which would start on the, I think the 22nd of August, and then with the Friday being a non-school day.
Of that first week.
Of that first week, so it's a 4-day week essentially.
Right, Monday through Thursday in the first week.
Okay. And the second proposal, which was presented at the January 6th meeting, is different from that.
Right. Yeah, and I'd just be careful about the word proposal. The board requested that the administration look at what a calendar could be. It wasn't the administration's recommendation.
It wasn't their preference, that's correct. Yeah, it was the board requested that second iteration.
Right, so and we discussed at the last meeting, which item should come forward.
Right.
And since generally the administration makes a recommendation, and their recommendation was starting on the Monday, and having a 4-day week, we said that should be the action item on the agenda.
Right, so we'll start there, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Other discussion? Okay. Any public comment? I'm sorry, Laurel?
Sorry. Yeah, I actually have quite a bit of discussion about it. As I've thought about it, what happened in December, we got the initial proposal, which is the one that we're talking about now. And I sat there and I looked at it, and it didn't feel right, and it didn't feel right, as I tried to express then, because we had gotten quite a number of comments back in September about the problem that this way of doing the calendar, which is starting 2 weeks before Labor Day, causes for people who wanted to attend the Grange Fair. And at that meeting, I heard for the first time, and maybe I haven't been paying attention, but I usually do, that one of the goals of the calendar and one of the reasons that we had moved to 2 weeks before Labor Day was to align better with Penn State. I had not heard that before as an intention of the school board. I don't remember discussing it.
I don't think that was part of Dr. O'Donnell's.
It wasn't part of his, but in the discussion around the table, when we were talking about why the timing was. It wasn't in any of the memos. No, it had not been out there before, and so I was surprised by it. And I've talked about it since, and I wound up because I was really quite puzzled. I've done a fair amount of research going back, trying to figure out where this came from. I have heard from parents for years about concerns about spring break. And we tried for a while not having spring break. And because of attendance issues like having, I think there were like 20% or 30%, there was a huge number of children out, making it really hard, to actually have school. The number that would be out at the beginning of the year for Grange Fair is clearly far less than that. So that in itself would not be a reason not to do that. However, I went and looked back. In the last 20 years, until last school year, we had aligned with Penn State for years. And it was always when Labor Day was early, like the 1st or 2nd, there had been controversy over the calendar every time that Labor Day was the 6th or the 7th of September, because that makes it harder to do. And 2 years ago, when we first went to 2 weeks before, Labor Day was on the 7th. This coming year is on the 5th. And we've never talked about why are we continuing to do it 2 weeks beforehand, other than the explanation that we want to align with Penn State. But that has not been a discussion at the board level or with the community. I think I might at some point be willing to move to 2 weeks beforehand, but not until there was a community discussion. When I went and looked back, the first things that I could find, because of how far back the archives went, or in 1996 that people started saying, because that was also a year when September 7th was Labor Day, or right around there. And people were saying, well, we need to start early. We can't wait till the 8th. It took from then another decade of discussion, public discussion, before there did seem to be an emerging consensus that it made sense to start a week before Labor Day. At that point, a few years later, the Grange Fair moved to be a week earlier. And from 2015, when they did that, until this past summer, there was no overlap. And it was because Grange Fair moved. We didn't change, Grange Fair changed.
And they lengthened it a little bit.
They lengthened it to a Saturday. We were not going to put kids in school on Saturday. The lengthening had nothing to do with us. It just didn't.
Right.
I know that some people have said that, and they've clearly misunderstood something, because they went from being, I think, a Tuesday around the weekend to Thursday, and they capped it at the weekends, but it doesn't affect us at all. The big thing that affected us was they went into the week before Labor Day. That's why we had the overlap. So I think there needs to be a much broader discussion in the community about the goals of our calendar, one of which we had said all along was not to align with Penn State.
I suggest you make a motion and change the policy then. I mean, to give me clarity as a board then. I mean, I appreciate it. We gave you the evidence of why we made that particular recommendation. We had 27 kids, I think is in the
No,
document.
I understand that it's not a population, it's not an issue, but, I mean,
You know,
I don't
so
know when
that's
we
where
began.
that came
Right,
from
so-
this year.
No, I understand, for
That's what I
this
can tell
year,
you.
what I'm saying is that we didn't talk about, there was board guidance back 10 years ago, and it said we would start the week before Labor Day. I believe that that was part of the decision that the Grange Fair made to move. Until they moved, every other district around us still was after Labor Day. Following their moving, they followed State College, and now they start before Labor Day. But until 2015, they didn't. So I would like to have us seriously consider looking back at starting only a week before Labor Day.
Well,
Actually,
And I'm not sure what the process is for doing that.
I'm sorry, because I think I'm the one who had brought up the concern in regard to starting at the time how starting and when Penn State starts, when the school district aligns with Penn State. I had expressed support for that because so the last couple years when we have aligned with the Penn State start time, one of the things that I had heard from people in the community was that this was really helpful because of childcare issues. Prior to that time, we had heard from parents that it's incredibly difficult to get any kind of childcare when there is a week that Penn State has already started and school has not started, because the primary staffing for childcare programs in the community is Penn State students. So once Penn State students are no longer able to provide staffing for childcare programs within the community, it's very difficult to run those programs. And that is why I had said that I support aligning with Penn State, because of what we had heard from families in the several years prior to when we began aligning with Penn State, was concern about how difficult it was to get childcare that week, because there was just nothing offered. Because I shouldn't say there's nothing offered, there's very little offered compared to the need, and because of Penn State students being back at school, that it's just very difficult to get childcare. And we had, the year before we went to aligning with Penn State, that we had asked if the administration would be able to run the SEAL program, or some kind of a school camp program that week. And my understanding was they did run that, but they certainly weren't able to staff enough for the number of students who requested to be part of that program that week. Because for the same reason that any other entity is not able to staff that. So that I just want to clarify, because I've been the most vocal proponent of aligning with the beginning of the Penn State calendar for that reason of what a hardship I have heard from parents in the community it is to not have school that week, regardless of whether you work for Penn State or anywhere else, simply because childcare is extremely scarce that week. So.
I know, Peter, I know you had your
Yeah,
hand up,
Peter
and
did.
I just want to make a point about process, though, to what one thing that Laurel said. Throughout our multiple iterations this year about the school calendar, Dr. O'Donnell has repeatedly asked us to revisit the policy on the calendar, and we have already charged the policy committee chair to ensure that that comes up on that. So I just want to be clear that no one's fighting that the administration would prefer more specific direction from the board. And there is a plan and an intent to do that. So I don't feel like we have to rehash all of that tonight. That can be done at committee. I mean, what's before us tonight is what's before us, and we need to make a decision. So.
Yeah,
Sorry, I just
that
wanted
was
to
actually
clarify.
last year too, we said we were going to do it. Absolutely, we need to do it. I
Last
certainly
year,
agree.
yeah, was a lot with COVID, so.
Dan?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that in my 6 years I've been sitting on the board, I have heard about the previous earlier board resolution about the calendar, and I got a chance to recently, due to Laurel's research, get a chance to see it, and I think we need to revisit and put a little more flesh on the bone, so to speak, of the approaches we're going to take through a policy revision. And I think Laurel's information is really helpful. It was the starting point, at least among the starting points that we can use for evaluating what we're doing. Another thought, and just to echo a previous board member who's no longer with us, but who would have brought this up, another piece to this puzzle is the fact that those who participate in the spring break on campus are the academic employees. They're not the essential employees. They're not as custodial staff and physical plant staff and so on. So it's a subset, if you will, of the employees at the university who participate in the spring break. And so that kind of comes into the mix too. I'm not sure how much, how you add or subtract that to the formula, but I think that's another piece of the puzzle that we need to take into account.
Yeah.
Should we look at this again through the policy committee?
Well, we
Yeah,
have
and
the
I
data,
yeah.
we have the data about attendance
Right.
when we didn't do that.
This
so.
is true, yeah, so that's an important piece of the puzzle, no doubt.
Yep.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah.
in regard to that, I think, it's critical that, we're like remembering having such a high percentage of students out of school was a big consideration.
At that time, that's correct.
But it's also clearly a major childcare issue for people here
Right.
at that time, so. Peter?
Yeah, so 2 things. One, some of this conversation is about the actual motion before us, which is to approve an academic calendar. And some of it is about what the process should be for the board going forward, which I think Dr. Bader addressed very well by saying that the policy committee and Dr. O'Donnell said, if there's going to be something, and I would encourage members of the board to focus on the agenda item that is before us and to put other things in the parking lot. Otherwise, I'll call the question.
Just to be
But-
clear, I was addressing that. I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
Gretchen?
I want to ditto what Dr. Buck said.
Deb?
I just wanted to acknowledge the many emails that we got from parents with all sorts of thoughts about this issue, and just let them know that although you may or may not have received a personal response, we read them all, we considered them all. It's really hard to reply to all of them, especially if all of us are expected to reply to all of them. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thanks.
Yep.
Yes, thanks. Thank you. That is very true.
Okay, any other comments or discussion?
Well, is it fair to say this is not necessarily, depending upon the outcome of the vote on the recommended calendar, this may not be the last calendar about which we would take action this evening. Is that fair to say?
I think we have to take action on
Let's
this
take
first.
action first, okay.
All right.
And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear that I was addressing why I would be voting on this calendar the way I was, what the things were that led me to feel the way I did about this calendar, and
Okay.
why I would be voting the way I was. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that.
Okay. Is there any public comment in regard to the calendar? Okay, anyone who's, for those who are here online, I see Rebecca Tarlow, I see your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Sorry, I'm not speaking on the calendar. Can I still speak?
This is for the calendar, but if you'd like to hold on till the end of the meeting, we may be able to reopen public comment then.
Okay, I think public comments are touching on a really important issue, so I hope you do get back to Zoom because we do have some important stuff to say, but I'll hold off because I'm not talking about the calendar.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jason and Megan Coopy, I see your hand raised. If you would like to unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Hello, this is Jason and Megan Coopy from Halfmoon Township. We just wanted to comment. I thank a lot of the board members for spending a lot of time on this. It is a very important topic to some of the population here in the district. What I would ask is that you at least give Monday and Friday off. I think that that is a decent compromise for this year. My personal feeling and belief is that especially for next year, we should be looking to start 1 week before Labor Day, not the 2 weeks that we've now moved to. This is only the second year. Last year was the first year that we've ever done that in the State College School District. And I do ask that we move back to the 1 week before, but I also understand that in this year that might not be possible. So we at least ask for the compromise that you give the Monday and Friday off, because my kids do have the shows on the Monday, and it would be very, very difficult to have them miss the very first day of school. I just don't think that is fair to them, but yet I want them to participate in their 4-H programs. In addition to that, I do think that the school district should really look at, school should not necessarily be just for childcare, but there needs to be some options for childcare. There's a lot of days off throughout the school year. We just had 2 here the last week with a Friday and a Monday off where childcare would be important also. And then we have the whole spring break where childcare is important. So I don't think the school should necessarily be making decisions based upon childcare. That is not what schools are for. Schools are for learning. And I do think that it is important for kids to learn in multiple ways, including outside of school. And so I think that, we need to appreciate summer with all the talk of mental health and everything else. I do find summer and the fair an extremely valuable part of what we do here in this county. And I think the more that we can get together as communities, the better off we are and the less problems we will have in the long run. So that is our personal belief. But I would at least ask, in so many ways in our world right now, we don't compromise. And I think that at least if we had the Monday, Friday compromise for this year, I think it would be good. And then I think for next year, we really need to look at moving it, as well as having some actual surveys and some ways to actually get a true feeling of what is needed in this area.
Yeah, so I can't see the agenda very well, but my concern is that what we're doing is going back to what we had met about in December. And so I would just, if you have to vote no in order to get another option on the table, I would just really appreciate people understanding that there were 2 options and now there's not. And that is confusing and frustrating to some people who thought that we were moving towards compromise, whereas this option that the administration has put forward is not a compromise at all at this time.
Thank you for your time, and we appreciate all the hard work by the board members.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, is anyone here looking to make a public comment in regard to the calendar? Okay, I don't see any more hands raised. So at this point, we can have a roll call vote.
Excuse me, wait, before
sorry.
you do that, could I explain my vote before or after? I'm not sure when.
Oh,
that
okay, we
comes
usually
in.
do that before we do public comment, but if you'd like to, yes, you may.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Yeah, I did agree with the gentleman that just spoke, because I think that we talk a lot about the mental health issue that our kids are facing, and I think that in bringing a lot of them, the family time is important, the bonding is important, and I think sometimes we're not seeing that, and we're not shortening. I know we're shifting it over, but they're seeing like we're decreasing their summer time with their family, and I think that that's important for us to consider as we make this decision. Childcare is very important because I've lived through that, having 5 toddlers, and I know I'm not diminishing that, but I think the well-being of our students is something that we really need to consider. Sometimes we talk about it was 27 kids or 37 kids. Some people say it was more, some people say it was less. And I think that it really doesn't matter, because I think that all kids should be looked at for their well-being. I don't think the majority should really dictate the rules for minority, because at some point you might be in the minority. So I think all of these have to be considered, and I think a compromise should be reached, because I do think that summertime with family is extremely important. A lot of people said that my kids were so smart and everything else, and they were, but we did value family time. I think that is so important for a child's well-being, that we should not forget that. And one last thing I want to add is that Dr. Chatters had this wonderful event for Martin Luther King, where Sarah Ahmed spoke. She was the guest speaker, and she said that we should not look at our kids like data points. And I think sometimes we forget that. I think we need to see our children as holistic individuals that needs a lot of things, that sometimes they could get more out of it with family time than being in a classroom. That's all I wanted to add.
I just want to, I don't look at kids as data points. I just want to be clear about that. I have my own kids and, you know, I can go beyond that, but I just,
didn't mean
because.
to point to anybody, it's just a comment that she made, which I thought was so important.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Anderson,
Yes?
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Bach,
No.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
No.
Dr. Duffy,
No.
Ms. Sidney,
No.
Okay, so with a 4-4 vote, that means the motion did not carry. It's a failed motion. Dan, did you want to make another motion?
Yeah, I'd like to propose that we would consider the draft calendar presented on January 6th, 2022, which would have a start date of August 23rd, followed by a non-school day on August 26th of the coming school year.
Okay.
And there was another adaptation, and I think they moved
The snow day.
the snow day from April, I believe.
Okay, so referencing
This is
the
referencing
calendar
the calendar that was
as provided
developed
on-
and presented to the board as an option on January 6th.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded, so we can discuss this motion now.
Can we
Laurel?
say what it was? Because I wasn't following.
It's the same thing, just start on Tuesday, not Monday. It's the
And
same
still
calendar.
Friday off, it's a 3-day
Start on
start.
Tuesday and
And-
not Monday.
Yep.
So starting one day later.
And you'd have one
Right.
less snow day, so you have one snow day in the
We're
calendar.
talking about one day difference.
Right.
I don't need to write that down. Okay.
I'll acknowledge.
And
Deb on that one.
technically, it
Deb
was
all
presented on January 10th, for the record. The memo that I wrote, that we wrote was January 6th.
Oh, sorry.
But it was
Sorry.
discussed at your meeting on the.
Sorry,
10th, just to
sorry.
be-
Sorry. For point
For
of
the record.
accuracy. For point of accuracy. Thanks, Dr. O'Donnell.
Days of different kind of infamy.
I keep reading the heading. I'm sorry.
All right, and having the snow day moved to the end means essentially we're pushing the end of school back one day.
Right.
By one day?
One day. We're
One day.
shifting the whole thing.
Did it
One day.
though from a Friday
Well,
to a
it's
Monday?
not moving the end of school unless we have multiple snow days.
Correct.
Which we,
I'm just,
Yeah.
but it is a
Right.
little bit different because when you look at what's considered to be the last day of school, for those who are listening, I'm air quoting that, without the snow days, that day doesn't move.
Right.
Because it's taking one of the snow
Built in.
makeup days and making it
Exactly.
an instructional day.
Right.
But if we have more than
two.
two,
Then we move in.
then it moves, yes.
Yeah. Laurel?
So, because I really was trying to understand it, I actually went through the end of school for the last, I think, 15 years. And I charted out, and the day that most often was the scheduled last day, not the day we ended, because we usually end after our scheduled last day. So when I say schedule, I mean schedule like this is June 2nd. The most common end day, scheduled day, was the 9th. There was like 1/5 and 1/11, and then there were a couple.
Okay,
So it averaged to being 8.7.
okay.
So with this calendar, if we do all of the snow days, we are right where we previously used to schedule, and we've gone beyond then. Which to me, when I looked at even the compromise and thought, well, is this trade-off worth it? To me,
It's one day either way.
Right, it's one day, but the whole, both of these, because we're starting a week, the big difference is starting earlier. And that's why in previous years, we went usually to around the 8th. It really, it depends on where Labor Day is and Memorial Day, but the 8th and 9th were the most days. Actually, it was never the 8th, it was the 9th and the 7th.
Okay.
Don't know what, but that to me was why, for me still, I understand the idea of compromise, and I agree with compromise. In this case, the compromise for some Grange families is better, but only some of them, and for other people, because there are other people who just don't come back then, because they're not tied to Penn State, and they've got other things going on, and they'll still be coming back a week earlier. So, to me, it still seemed like a big change from where we had been, and not worth it to end that early. It would be the earliest we've ever ended.
Wait, so you're saying you don't support this calendar either?
Right, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just not.
I'm just trying to understand what.
I'm sorry, no, to me, ending the 2nd seems very, very early.
Okay, all right.
And to me, it's a compromise on the front, but it's no change at the end, and it's both things. to me.
Okay. All right.
There are really no camps that week in June, by the way. I could find one.
Well, if we're in school that week, then why would there be? Right? Okay. But, okay, Dan?
I just want to acknowledge that this is not a substantial, could be argued it's not a substantive change, but it's not a substantial change. But what it does is acknowledges the voice of a subset of our community for whom a particular set of activities and the availability of that experience for others who aren't part of the agricultural community, in which they can more fully participate, if only by one day. So I think there's a lot to be said for it in that respect, at least at this time, until we meet as a policy committee and look at this, all the moving parts of this, and see what we can accomplish in terms of reconciling this basically a town gown conflict, between the university and the local community. That's what's in play here. So it's not a big deal. One day is not a big deal, but it's meaningful in terms of the message it says to a significant portion of our community. It seems to me.
Peter?
Yeah, two things. One, I concur with what Dan just said and would add to it that the educational value to the subset of students is extraordinarily high. I understand that there is an educational trip waiver form and that this gives additional consideration to that group of students and those families. I'll just leave that at that. I would also encourage Ms. Zidney to vote for this calendar, because voting for one this evening would be helpful, and that destroying the okay for the sake of the perfect seems to me to be very counterproductive. I'll just leave it at that.
I have a question.
Gretchen?
Wait, so are you against this calendar too, Laurel? Oh, okay.
If it had to be a unanimous vote, I would listen to what you said, but since it doesn't have to be, I really feel that we made a commitment to the community that we would start the week before Labor Day, and we changed it in 2010 that we have followed until 2 years ago. It's very, very clear. It's on the resolution. We never walked it back.
Can I make a comment? Sorry, Amy?
So I really don't want to belabor this overly long, but for the sake of explaining myself. The reason that I support the administration's recommendations is, one, I defer to them as educators in deciding what are the most optimal instructional days that they can generate, and I feel like they provided copious amounts of data as to how they rationalized and made the compromises and decisions they made and the input they took from the calendar committee. Number two, I'm a trained veterinarian. I have worked with farmers. I have grown up in a farming community as well. The fact that I don't support this calendar does not reflect on my support of that community. And neither does it indicate that I negate the needs of students' mental health. I think there are tricky spots about when we talk about like who's a minority. Certainly our agricultural community is a minority in our community. However, when we get into very small groups, we have other students, we already hashed all this out. We have students with religious needs and other needs. This is a unique situation in that it's the first days of school.
Right.
And that is really, really difficult. But I do disagree with the comment made that no compromise was made. Originally, the school district, generally start a 4-day week, Tuesday through Friday, when we had the 4-week starts of soft start. And the administration made the compromise to shift to a Monday to Thursday and make the Labor Day weekend a 4-day weekend in order to accommodate what they were informed was one of the most busy days at the Grange Fair. So there was compromise effort made, it just came in the original proposed calendar. And those are the points I want to make. Thanks.
Gretchen?
I just wanted to quickly say that I would have voted for the calendar recommended by the administration. I'll vote for this calendar if it'll pass, and that's because I know from 6 years being on the board that nobody will ever be satisfied with the calendar. That's just not a possibility. And so I think it's great to send it to policy and have everybody look at it in terms of are there any improvements that can be made policy-wise, but I have learned that we could talk about this for another 7 hours and still the same result would occur. So I would have been happy to vote for the previous calendar. I'm happy to vote for this calendar, and I think we should go ahead and vote. Can I call the question?
I do have a point of order.
Or a guess?
Wait, so what, if she's made a motion to call the question.
I make a motion to call the question.
Point of order.
Do we need to wait for a second before she makes a
Yeah.
point of order?
Go ahead. Yeah, I'll second to call the question.
I don't know if it's order. It's a factual correction. There is no 4-day Labor Day weekend. It's 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, so that would not supersede to call the question because it doesn't have
It's
bearing on the
Fridays.
question.
It's not Labor Day weekend.
It's a week
It's
away.
different weekend.
Yes,
Oh,
you're
whatever.
right. You're right. It was moved from Monday to Friday based on the
right, I
agricultural
understand.
students' input.
I just, if someone was hearing 4-day weekend, I wanted them to know that,
There's no 4-day weekend.
right, that was all.
2 3-day weekends in a row. Yeah.
So.
Okay, so there was a
So when-
motion
what-
and a second to call the
Yeah,
question.
but when you call the question.
Yeah, so-
There is supposed to be a 2/3 majority, so 6 of us would have to vote that, because it just closes debate right away.
Is that on our board policy? Is that what it is?
I don't know that it's in the board policy or not.
That's the standard Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay, but we have a board
We don't
policy
always
that's.
follow that.
Yeah, we just have a board policy that is specific to a number of different potential motions, so.
There's been ample discussion, certainly, between the first motion and the second motion on the calendar. I think it's appropriate to move forward with the vote.
Okay, so this is a vote to call the question. Does that have to be a roll call vote, or can it be a aye
Roll
vote?
call.
Okay, this is a roll call on calling the question.
Dr. Vader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
No on principle.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Okay.
So then a vote on the second motion.
Do we take public comment first, though?
I think you've had sufficient public comment.
Thank you. So then we'll have a roll call vote on the motion on the table.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
No.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Baber.
No. Okay, so that motion carries, and we'll start school on a Tuesday, all right?
All right.
Okay.
Excuse me.
I'm going to take a 5-minute break. That sounds like ahead and reconvene here. Okay. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. Item B under action items is a motion to approve the CTC Perkins Compliance Policy and Procedure Manual as shown in attachment 6B.
Brant, so moved.
Second?
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Okay, any public comment? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item C is a motion to approve the purchase of a refrigerator for Mount Nittany Middle School as shown in attachment 6C.
Brant, so moved.
Bader,
Duffy, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Peter? No, okay. Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item D is a motion to approve the bid award for the IT generator connection as shown in attachment 6D.
Duffy, so moved.
Bader, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
Just a comment.
Yes.
I did appreciate seeing the full bid table here. Thank you.
Okay, any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes. Okay, item E is a motion to approve the purchase of internet and wide area network E-rate services as shown in attachment 6E.
Brant, so moved.
Duffy, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion?
I'm curious, but it's not essential. Do we know what the cost difference was between the previous contract and the current contract?
It's about a 5% increase.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, any public comment on this item? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Okay, item F is a motion to approve the 2021-2022 affiliation agreement with Penn State University for undergraduate student interns as shown in attachment 6F.
Brant, so moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Laurel?
I did not have time to go back to previous years. Is this basically something we have done fairly annually, or is this a whole, I know we have done similar things. Have we done this particular one previously?
Danielle or Curtis, do you know if this is oh, I see Jean's on. Jean, is this an agreement we've had previously?
We had it with the HDFS, but we've never formally done it with RHS, so that's why we're making that happen.
So same services for those part, for those services, but we need to do something formal with them
Also,
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
With rehab, it was
With
previously.
rehabilitation, we have
Yeah.
not had
Okay.
an agreement in place.
Okay,
But
so
we
this is
did
a
have-
new one, but it's similar to the ones we've had.
Mhm.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jean. Item G, oh, I'm sorry, we need to vote on this. Okay, so there was the discussion. I was ready to move on.
No rush here.
Yeah. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Okay, now that item has passed. Item G is a motion to approve the Pathways Agreement with the Pennsylvania College of Technology as shown in attachment 6G.
Brant, so moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Okay, public comment? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
Yes, please.
Okay, that item has passed. Item H is a motion to approve a 2021-2022 mental health care provider contract with Dr. Janice Bird as shown in attachment 6H.
Brant, so moved.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Dan?
Yeah, this is kind of related to the kinds of stuff I used to do, and so now I first want to apologize to Dr. Chatters for my first email today, which reflected my failure to really fully attend to all the elements of the memo, and as I did that, I came to have a much better understanding about the nature of this proposal. What I'm wondering about as far as the role of this individual, this is a $5,000 contract for several days of support, training and consultation by this individual to help our MTSS systems, in other words, our building principals and others involved with intervention services for kids. I guess in relation to cultural competence, the question I would have is, this is a relatively short period of time to really engage in systems change in terms of the training involved and such. And would this kind of service be carried over? Would there be an extension to the contract for next year or other services, or perhaps a formal way in which this would be operationalized so that this person would only have to be around through the end of this year, and next year people could pretty much function on their own without this support? That's what I'm wondering. In other words, how will this link up with our services that are presently delivered in what is essentially a new program? Now, the MTSS system is something which is just under development. And how does that connect with next year's operations?
I see Saria online. I think she's responding. Hey, Saria, go ahead.
Okay, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Duffy. And yes, the contract is from now until the end of the year. And the hope with all of our providers is to continue a renewal process. Yes, the MTSS process is a new-ish process. And why I say new-ish is because we've also been doing PBIS, which is also a form of MTSS within our schools for some time as well. And this individual, the aim is not to have this individual kind of link up to our services, because one of the most important things when providing culturally competent care is not just to link up, but to work together to revamp. And something that we have been doing for some time is looking at culturally responsive methods to responding to MTSS. So the hope is for Dr. Bird to work with us in building a model that is going to continue to be responsive moving forward. But you're absolutely right, because I know some of your questions in looking at how do we identify the need for supports for this individual and different pieces like this. This is an individual who is going to continue to help us ensure that we are responding to the needs of all students, with also an additional specific focus on working to ensure that we're meeting the needs in a culturally competent way for our students of color. So yes, this is for this year, and the hope is to continue it through next year. Also, the same goes for Dr. Harris, who had a contract that was passed, I believe it was at the last board meeting as well. And Dr. Duffy, just to also say that this isn't a quick process, meaning that it's not for us to work with Dr. Bird until the end of the year and then move on. We want to make sure that what we're doing, we are always collaborating with experts. And so this is just until the end of the year. And of course, we will continue to renew as we move forward.
Thank you, Saria. And that was my impression about this kind of work involving systems development. Though I would think at the same time that since this person is not a formal employee of the district, that there will need to be a time where we can say we can be set free to do this on our own without additional technical support. So, I mean, not this year, obviously, it's only 3 or 4 months left in this year, but maybe after next year to have some discussion about, like, well, when do we know we've accomplished what we need to accomplish? So, at any rate, I don't want to rush things, though. These things take time to develop. Thank you.
Laurel?
I was curious about the term consultation in this. And I'm trying to figure out if this is a sort of training type, where you're actually training the adults we have who then will work with the children, or whether this is directly consulting with the children. The way it was worded as consultation services to team, but then it also says the students. Can you just clarify that? Because we do have practitioners who are working directly with students, and this looked a little different.
We do. So, and this could be both or either, because this individual is also a counselor. So meaning that the individual is working to help to, first of all, get to know our systems better, because I think that consultation works better when an individual knows your systems. So that might be, for example, sitting within groups with, alongside an employee to look at how our systems are operating. That could also be consulting with our principals and our MTSS teams. That can be even additional meetings, for example, with myself, other directors and administrators as well. So it's consulting in many different contexts, but I will say primarily it's going to be informing us as we are working to provide services with students as well.
Hopefully it will build on that as opposed to the individual. I think this is sort of echoing what Dr. Duffy was saying in terms of eventually having our people in the district ready to and trained to do this.
Yeah, we should be building capacity.
Right.
I mean,
Thank you.
that's fundamentally what we should be doing, is building capacity among our staff, fostering, first as an outside observer and through these consultative conversations, getting to know how our system works, but then providing interventions and discussing with Dr. Chatters, with Surya, the progress that's being made, and then at the end of the day, having an aim point in terms of are being able to manage, to have the resources within the district to do this without a substantial amount of additional assistance. So I think that in any other systemic process, I think that would be what would be called for. So I appreciate this opportunity to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, I think, in this case where it seems to me like this is an opportunity for someone who we might not normally be able to employ within the district, because this is a tenure track professor at the university, to be able to get some of their expertise while they're, still able to do their day job, as a professor at Penn State. That, it seems like in that sense, maybe we're not necessarily going to have in-house, like not necessarily going to develop in-house the same expertise, but this can help, having someone of this caliber with this experience and this knowledge base be able to help us, move our system of supports along. It seems like a productive approach.
I agree, and so we're really looking at finding ways in which we can become more effective in addressing these needs. But as any contractual relationship only needs to exist until there's no longer a substantial need for those services. So how do we determine if and when there's no longer a need for these services down the line? If the purpose of this,
Can we let Surya answer that though?
But the purpose of this is about training people and developing our systems, not about providing interventions. It's about basically building our systems to be able to be more effective. That's my understanding about this.
I just want to let Surya answer that question.
Yeah, that is part of it, Dr. Duffy, but I also want to include that one of the key aspects of the work that we're doing as well is to diversify our workforce. So one of the things that I want to add there is something that there is the part about strengthening systems, but there's also the important part about representation within our workforce. And what I mean by that is that we are working, that is something that as SCASD we've been looking to do over the long run, is continue to diversify our workforce. So as we partner with individuals within the community that are providing representation for the students that are within our school district, when you talk about what it looks like in building capacity, is ensuring that yes, we would like to eventually be able to bring in-house individuals that are representative of our student body, and also providing these top tier services that can integrate into our MTSS systems. So it's going to take time for us to get there. Another expertise of Dr. Janice Bird is also supporting employees of color. And so there's a piece of her being invited to help to provide us with opportunities to be able to also retain the employees of color that we have, and then also to work toward making our school climate a place to, like you said, Dr. Duffy, so that we can bring in more employees of color that can be representative and at the same time continue to provide the top tier services that all of our students need.
I just wanted to voice my support for this position, and to the point of some other observations we heard is that making these shifts and changes that are our goals regarding equity and other things is a slow onward progress. And so I am very comfortable deferring to our administrators and to Dr. Chatters to determine when we are at a point where we need fewer inputs. So I feel no rush to demand that, we know that our student population currently we're turning a big ship. We're making some big changes about what our expectations are for school culture and climate. And that's not an easy process. And in order to do so, I think, we have to be prepared that there's going to be multiple iterations in how we ask other professionals for assistance and help. So I really appreciate that so much expertise has been sought and used in multiple ways. As you mentioned, Saria, that she's going to be supporting both not just students, but also faculty. So I really appreciate that both you've sought that input and that we've had people in our community, experts at Penn State, that are willing to also engage with us and provide us with their expertise. So thanks.
Okay.
And
Other
I don't mean in
questions?
any way to suggest that I disagree with this proposal, that I think that the need for it is not well-founded. Certainly the need is there, the services seem appropriate. I'm just trying to build an understanding for myself about the boundaries for this work and what it all means. And I appreciate Sriya explaining and giving me a broader sense of what's involved. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions over here? No. Saria, I did have a question for you. So, one of the, in talking with parents in the district who have students who have 504 plans or IEPs, often, related to, attention deficit disorder or anxiety disorders, for which they need a 504 plan, one of the things that parents have expressed to me a number of times is that sometimes knowing what supports to ask for in that 504 plan, like the parent is not necessarily an expert, a subject matter expert themselves on what supports might best help, their student with, for example, ADHD or an anxiety concern to be able to succeed in school, and that it would help to have a better sense, to be sure that the district also that they do have the expertise, the inputs to be able to, that when they're recommending supports for students that should go into those 504 plans, that they're sort of, that they're research-based and, carefully thought out in terms of providing the support students need. So I guess one of my questions is this, and when it says that Dr. Bird would be, helping provide these consultation services for MTSS, the MTSS team working with students with these, these concerns or 504 plans, for example, is that the kind of consulting she might be able to help provide in terms of understanding what supports might best help students be successful, so that when they're building those plans? Does my question make sense?
Yeah, so yeah, so what you're saying, and I don't know if I'm frozen, so hold on a second. Okay, there we go. Can you hear me, Amber?
But yeah.
Okay. So yes, now I understand where you are coming from and saying like there's a need for parents, because one of the things is that we do have information on 504 plans, and I'm assuming that when an administrator, because I've had an opportunity to sit through some 504 plans where administrators actually will go through all of the different options that parents have, but sometimes parents don't necessarily even know exactly what their kid needs, right?
Exactly.
Meaning that that especially when it comes to 504 plans and mental health concerns, some parents, for example, may not know that a child with anxiety could do with, for example, more time on tests, or even splitting a test up into parts because their test anxiety may cause them to, not be able to do well on the test. So I would say that is something that definitely we would be hoping for school counselors and others to be able to help with parents in doing, because an individual consultant would not necessarily be able to do something on such a large scale. What I'm hoping that this consultant can do is also help us look at the accommodations that we already provide and ensure that those accommodations that we are providing as options to parents are also culturally competent. Because one of the things that we recognize when we look at IEPs and 504s is oftentimes those accommodations are normed on the majority population, right? And so if you have individuals that are, for example, I'll give you an example, 504 plans may be more commonly used for individuals with ADHD, but not as necessarily commonly used with students who have major depressive disorder, right? So some of those accommodations may work well with a kid who has ADHD, but we may not have as much research on how a 504 plan can help a student with major depressive disorder, which it needs to look more at attendance, and different things like that. So I think that if we make sure that our overall plans are more culturally competent, that's how this consultant can help us as a district as a whole.
That's really helpful in clarifying. Thank you, Saria. Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right, any public comment on this item? Okay, then we will have a roll call vote.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Thank you very much, Saria, for weighing in on that.
Yeah, thanks, Surya.
Thank you.
Item I is a motion to approve the 2021-2022 expulsion waiver agreement number 3. So I'd be looking for a motion on that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that has been moved and seconded, and then we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brandt.
Yes.
Dr. Buck.
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion.
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore.
Yes.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Moving on into the information discussion part of the agenda, item A is regarding a request for proposal for enrollment in attendance area consultant. This is shown in attachment 7A.
So Randy and I are going to just share a little overview. We have, Randy, did you post that to the agenda, the slides?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I'm getting an error message on
Me too.
Obviously, it's the information's in the memo, but we'll use the slides to highlight it, to move through the information efficiently, and then we'll field questions. I think
Thank you, then.
the slide that you see here outlines really, several of you were on the board at the time we were discussing taking a look at updated enrollment projections because we were concerned about capacity of some of our schools, and then we also had developed some additional capacity at a couple of the schools that had construction projects. So we just haven't gotten back to it. So we're asking you with this request to allow us to bring some expertise in to help us with taking a look at the enrollment projections as well as the boundaries if we do need to move them. If we don't do anything, okay, right now Mount Nittany, is, and to say we want to look at capacities is a little different because when you built that school, PDE said the capacity, I believe, was 420. We have 413 kids at Mount Nittany. We're using some of the spaces differently because we have an ESL program there. We have autistic support program there. So when you look at capacity, it's not simply just looking at the document we filed with the state. So we have to update that information based on what we have in the schools now, which we would go through.
Like a functional capacity.
Yeah, we would go through that with the process that we'd engage in. And we're lucky it's Mount Nittany. If this was Park Forest, because I think a few years ago we all thought this was going to be Park Forest Elementary. What we would be doing is likely busing kids to Radio Park from Park Forest. We would say, hey, we're going to take a grade level from that school or part of a grade level and bus them to another building. Unless there was the ability to put a temporary classroom somewhere. With that said, right now, we have empty classrooms in the district. I think out of the past 10 or 11 years, or actually from the turn of this century, there might only be 2 other years, maybe 3, where we had smaller K-5 enrollments than we have right now. So we're pretty flat. We're not growing. It's shifting, is what we've seen. So, we want to take a look at things and make sure what our options are if we need to do anything. Because if we get the study done and it says the incoming students at Mount Nittany project to be lower where we had been, and maybe we deal with the what we have coming through. The interesting part is it's K and 1. Kindergarten and first grade, they're their largest grades. But I think it's important to do the study as best as we can, and then look at our options of what we can do. And then we can also look at things like phasing something in so it would be less impactful. We just have to see what the ramifications are and what the financial impact is as well. So we're here to just not do the process, but look to bring in some expertise to help us. During the committee meeting, several of you shared some points, and I think taking a look at your policy and talking about what guidance you want to give us, because it will be a complex and process if we were to adjust any boundaries. And we want kids to be in their schools. We want them to be in schools with other kids. I love seeing the kids and taking a poll on who wants a snow day and stuff like that with 5th graders. And I think they enjoy talking to me, but I think they should be in a school with their peers. So that's a little overview. The next slide, Randy's going to go ahead and give you a highlight there.
Right, so what expertise will a consultant provide that we're looking for? Obviously, we want them to be doing enrollment projections, and we have been using Decision Insight, and we have some data that points there that we can pull from and update you with. But before we want to just do this holistically and we're hoping that a consultant can do that, looking at GIS mapping, telling us where the kids actually are, aiding in analyzing our building capacity issues, and then assisting with community outreach. This is not something we're handing off to them. We're obviously going to be partnering with them, but it's going to be administration's recommendations if there's any changes or to boundaries or any other recommendations that would come out of this.
I think that would be key. We wouldn't expect someone who doesn't know the community or work with us to actually make a recommendation, because I've been involved with this before, and there are many different ways you can make it happen if you do have to change boundaries. The slide on process.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Randy. Obviously, we'll be consistent with your policy. We made a note in the calendar about asking you to take a look at your policy, because I think some of you had some good suggestions, although I think we're on the same page, I think it would be good and be an opportunity if you want to hear from the community about what they value. And I genuinely think if you're talking policy, which I think is absolutely what you should be looking at, getting input from the community if you want is obviously an opportunity for you to do that. So that could happen early on in what you don't need all the information to take a look at your policy and talk about what's important to you in the community. So process-wise, I think that's important. Number 7, in regard to capacity.
Bob, you already spoke on this a little bit. Just there's a PDE calculation, but then there's also our room capacities. And one of the things that, again, you have a policy on the number of on class sizes. So PDE's class number of students that they would put in a classroom would be different. So we need to apply that to all of our classrooms, looking at our student enrollment, and then also placement of some of our specialized district-wide programs as well. Because as Dr. O'Donnell mentioned, Mount Nittany has more of those programs than some of the other buildings. And there's reasons for that, and there's some good sound rationale. And again, that's information that we've not prepared for right now. That will be part of the process and part of the discussions that we'll have with you.
As far as communications go, I'd mentioned if you did outreach regarding your policy, we could help you with that, obviously. What we would like to do is look to a consultant who has a lot of experience with this, so that we're not just plugging in someone doing the enrollment projections. As we look out at other large districts that do this, they do engage with consultants that bring more expertise to the table than simply enrollment projections and a GIS tool. So that's what we would hope to identify if possible, and then utilize them to be part of developing updates to the projections, share those out, look at what challenges lie ahead, and then from there, if we have to make some adjustments, then taking a look at steps on how we may do that. So in regard to steps with this particular RFP, Randy outlined those in there for you, some estimated timelines. And, I mean, really right now, this could not, if we have to make changes, there's no way they could happen before the fall of '23. And even that timeline is tough, because if you really look at beginning with the end, you'd want to have those well in advance of registration time periods for families. So you're really looking at sometime next fall or late fall, you'd have to have the whole action item to you, is what I would expect. I wouldn't want to put it later than the end of December on families, because I think that would be butting up closely to registration timelines. So that's really the little bit of an overview of what we put in writing, and I hope since the committee meeting that we better communicated the enrollment projection step, because we don't know what we don't know right now. We do know we have a challenge at Mount Nittany, but maybe it's not going to get worse. I'd love to be back in our boardroom too. However, maybe there's a way to take a look at that next year where we project we may need 3 rooms. We may need 2. We also are looking at our facility possibly helping with a 3rd room, because beyond where our offices are at the end, there's a large storage room, but that was equipped with HVAC in case we ever needed to build it out. So there might be a solution if we needed 3 rooms to use 3 rooms and still enable us to have our larger boardroom. Love College Township, but this is pretty small for what we try to do. So, is that
I think
anything
that's
else?
great.
And we'll open it up to questions and answer what we can.
Right. Gretchen?
I have, I'll just start off with a clarification question. So if I understood correctly, you're saying that the K-1 enrollment is what's increased, but the 5th grade rooms is what the problem is?
Well, we moved them over. We weren't going to move. We have 4 kindergarten and 4 first grade at Mount Nittany. We weren't going to move kindergarten kids out of their building.
So the increase is K through 1, not 5th grade?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
The rationale for moving 5th grade is Mr. Feldman, the principal, felt that those students would handle the transition to our building a little bit easier than the younger grades. We also talked with them about moving some of the specials, and that would have affected every day a different group of students coming over for their specials. And so this way, the 5th, just to give you a little bit of background, the 5th graders start their day in their building with their special classes. They come over for a couple different of their part of their curriculum, part of their day. Then they go back for lunch and recess, and then they come back into our building. So it was actually from a grade level, from an age of a student, and also from a schedule, it was almost the least disruptive as possible.
No, that's helpful. I was just confused because I heard the increase in this, but it's a different grade. And then, I mean, when I was in the facilities committee and I heard the idea about hiring a firm to do this, I was sort of taken aback because I know that this was just done a few years ago. And so that was one thought I had. And then the other thought I had was, well, why would we hire an outside, I shouldn't say why would the school district hire an outside entity when, Van Schweiger is very familiar with transportation in terms of GIS data and how many students go to which school, and you're saying that you were pretty much aware of where these increases in enrollment would occur, and now you're seeing it. And so I'm just curious, is there any way that this could be done in-house, just because there's so much more intimate knowledge about what the needs are of the district than hiring an outside firm? That last time we did that, it didn't seem like we learned all that much.
We don't have the expertise to do the demographic projections, the enrollment projections. We would need the demographer to, I'm pretty good at math, but I'm not going to be able to do that for you. I think that's key. In regard to the analyzing the GIS software and changing attendance boundaries, I think we want, Mr. Schwager, yeah, absolutely, would have a lot to do if something changed in attendance boundaries with routes and things, however, as well as if things were phased. However, I don't think doing the analysis and changing them is something that we would expect Van to do for us. So and it was done in 2010. I was not here for that process. Although we'd done the process where I was, it was done quite differently than it was done here. And so I don't know how it was done. I know there were many iterations on the board agendas of different revisions to the proposal, which I'm not sure why that was happening. I think we'd want to get to a point to understand what type of problems we have, and do we need to make changes as a key first step.
Gretchen, if I may add, obviously Mr. Swager knows what to do with the student, how to get the students transported to schools that are here now and through the attendance boundaries. But as we're potentially looking at some of those changes, and also looking at where the students will be in future years, that's something that I don't think any of us here on staff have that ability, as well as our plates are already full with a lot of things that maybe we could learn it, but we also don't have access to GIS software and things like that. So that's why there's different times when we look for
I thought
experts.
there was access. I thought somebody has that is that not true? There is no access to GIS data in the district?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm not sure
we
where
have the
that.
data to fill this up, to
Correct.
feed into it. But
Correct. And we've done enrollment projections, and we've worked with Decision Insight, and they've provided us with where they expect students to be in future years. But again, they just provided the software and gave us the software and the data to manipulate and make some of our own projections. And we could do that, absolutely. If you don't want us to hire and bring someone in, we can find a way to do that. But we believe that bringing someone in to help us with this will give us a better product, because we don't want to have to do this in every year or make adjustments year over year.
Yeah, the reason I asked is because I was talking to some former board members, and they were saying that back then there was not an outside firm hired, and that it was actually more accurate than the Decision Insight that was conducted by that firm a few years ago.
Well, Dr. Stuman did enrollment projections, and he no longer, and that's why we switched to Decision Insight, because he was no longer doing the projections. And that was a very different process from having Dr. Stuman and then versus Decision Insight. That's a very accurate statement. I wouldn't deny that at all.
Yeah, I was just curious because there's obviously, we're really lucky that we live right near Penn State, and there's a lot of very bright people there who, would anybody want to help the school district, or could there be a graduate class, or I don't know, just some way to tap into local expertise that's, not very far away, rather than hiring Decision Insight or some other, just because it didn't seem like it was all that accurate when that result occurred like 2 or 3 years ago, when we did the demographic study for which schools should have how many classrooms.
I think if there's someone with expertise in town, then they can respond to the request and consider it at a much lower rate.
Yeah, that would be great.
If they want to do something. But with that said, I think it's a pretty sensitive process to ask any of our parents to head up, or, this is, so we want to get it right, and this is, what we think makes a lot of sense. And it will be incredibly sensitive. I understand it was sensitive here. It was very sensitive in my prior experience too. If you're going to move attendance boundaries, if you do, you better dot your i's and cross your t's and do your outreach.
This would be a,
Could I,
I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask, this will be a competitive bidding process. In other words, we'll be dealing with a number of different potential providers and evaluating their capacity, evaluating their history, maybe speaking with people.
Yeah, you want to see what people
contractors.
have done, and
Yeah.
it's almost,
Right.
yeah, you want to see where have they done it, and then how did it go?
How happy or satisfied with their clients.
Peter?
Yeah, so I think that this is a really good idea. I think it's a really good idea, having just come out of municipal government and looking at the number of and scale of different land development plans that have been proposed. You know, in the center region, I mean, we're talking about pre-pandemic, nigh on $1 billion worth of development projects in just the course of a few years. Several of those are high-rise buildings where you're not going to have families. You go out into Ferguson Township, there was a land development plan proposed near AccuWeather. If that goes in, there will be families there. If it doesn't go in, what does that do to school capacity? What are the projected likelihoods for those? Half Moon Township, there was almost there was a teetering land development plan that did not go through. There's still development pressure. Where is it going to go? What does that do? The Center Region Planning Agency, located in the Council of Governments building, I raised this at the last General Forum meeting. Thank you very much, Amber, for talking to me about it before I went. The planning agency has information about all that. And I would think that in-house, we don't have the analytical expertise in order to look at those different scenarios and do the planning, the technique, et cetera, that could work with Van. And I mean, it is very complicated. And I think, you know, what we have before us, including in the final pages of the, I guess, the draft RFP that's in here, is that there were other, you know, sort of more like values-laden or process-oriented aspects that could be included in those, in the, what page is that? That is pages 19 and 20 of the RFP, and that if I would encourage, you know, staff that they could put those possibly as like ancillary. We would also be interested in these kinds of things related to like integrated design or blah, blah. We talked about some of those in the facilities committee. I don't need to enumerate them here, that those could go in there and for us to vote on the final version of it on the 21st.
So I guess that's a question I have about, since the discussion that we had at the Facilities and Grounds Committee, like, has your, like, what you have in mind in terms of the scope of the work that you would want them to do changed in any way? Because we had talked about needing a consultant that's very good with, like, running communication processes. And I guess before, like, we asked something like that to be in a proposal, I just wouldn't want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of whether that's something we do want from the consultant or not.
I don't think that we heard anything about what type of a firm or what type of process at the committee that we were disappointed with or that we didn't agree with. And so I think that we're really well aligned with those comments, but I think that, and those are the types of things that we're looking for. We've been very frank, I think now twice in talking about this, that we're looking for someone to help us with communication. It's just that we don't expect them to do the communicating, that they will help us prepare. We are owning this process, okay?
Okay, that's a helpful answer, yeah.
So, yeah, I think that, I mean, obviously, there may be some technical pieces of the information, technical pieces of the calculation and the work behind the scenes that they would be best suited to communicate that with to not only the board, the committee, the community, but this is our process.
Right, okay. I just wondered because it wasn't in here and we had talked about that potentially, but that makes, what you're saying makes a great deal of sense to me. Peter?
Yeah, well, actually, if Ms. Zidney wants to go, and then I can go, she had her hand up.
Okay, thank you. I think it's sort of the same thing. On page 13, it talks about the percentages given. Cost of services, 50%, proposer record of quality, 45%, and then conformance to the specifications, requirements, terms, et cetera, is only 5%. And I was wondering why that's so, that may just be a standard way of doing it. What type of thing, is that sort of like your fudge factor? People are very close, that's, it's just
I think so, yes.
5% seems so low.
It does.
For something like conforming.
But I guess that the other two are
The ones
pretty
we
darn
really care
important.
about, yeah. Okay. And then further down, it talks about that the proposals will be reviewed by district personnel and/or agents and consultants. Are board members agents and consultants? Or for this purpose, are we considered personnel? Because we had talked about who would be evaluating the.
I did not include any, that is the one thing that was left out from the F&G, the Facilities and Grounds conversation. There's no reference to board members being involved in this process. I think that we need to take board direction from that.
Okay.
For that. And a lot of this obviously is very standard boilerplate language. But to your point, yeah, I did not add anything in specific. I felt that that needed to be a board discussion.
Okay, so we're not the ones who qualify as that. That's what I was asking. Pardon me?
Are we not agents?
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
Well,
I think if you want to have board members involved in making the proposal or the process, you should give us your advice as a board and make a motion on what you want to see. I think what we're suggesting is we would propose, if we had to make any changes, we would expect us to make those proposals.
And that starts with the review of the RFP submittals.
Right. So, but if you want to involve a board member with what we believe is our responsibility, you can tell us to do that.
Correct.
And we'll do it.
Yeah, I think the piece that concerns me about that is the communication piece. And where I think that it would be helpful to have some board people sort of looking at how they're dealing with presenting things. And that, I think we had talked about that.
I think we're pretty good at communication, but I understand
Yeah.
where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's just a different, if they mess up, we get blamed more than you do.
You think so?
Ultimately, yeah. Ultimately,
I
yeah.
can give you some evidence.
Yeah, I mean, we all handle it all together, so, but I think, and would you want that as a motion now, or when you bring back an RFP?
Anything to make the final document more clear that you're going to vote on is beneficial.
I
Okay.
can't help it.
So, sorry, Dan,
Sorry,
Peter
sorry.
had his hand raised.
Oh,
Sorry, thank you, Peter, for letting me.
Yeah, oh, no, absolutely. So I really appreciate, Randy, that you said that we will own the process. That's very helpful because it delineates the responsibility. So, I think one of the things that we talked about in the Facilities and Grounds Committee meeting that I think we could bake into this request for proposals would be to say something like, if the board is open to this, because we talked about it at the Facilities and Grounds Committee, one of the best things about the leadership and energy and environmental design processes for the high school and for the elementary schools was the community input sessions. That there were those like design charrettes at 30, 60, 90%. Now, do we need 30, 60, and 90% for this? Probably not. But if we were able to say to the consultant, would you be willing to do an open forum, where we would provide some sort of midpoint so that we could get input from parents, from our families in the district, so that we could kind of see where things were going and where, that looks really great, and where the things are that might be buzzsaws, ahead of it, so that we can have really good communication going ahead, because I'm thinking back to just back to the high school referendum. right? All of the communication that was around it made a big difference in making sure that that referendum passed. And so it might be a little bit slower, although we wouldn't be doing this for 18 months or something like that. It wouldn't go into, is that right? Am I remembering that right?
At the earliest.
At the
fall of
earliest, right.
23.
So
I think-
slower, more process, if we can bake that into the RFP, would be helpful. And I'm not saying that requires a board member to be in those meetings when you evaluate the proposals, but if we have that in there at the get-go, we might get farther.
So you bring up a very interesting point, Peter, and I can link this not only to our building projects and the referendum, but also to our solar power purchase agreement. And one of the things that I will definitely clarify in our proposal is to make sure that there's got to be a certain number of hours of interaction, whether it's as we've all found, in person or virtual. And then, we don't know exactly how this is going to go, so we need to build some flexibility or some expandability, or contractability, but typically it would be just expandability in that if we want to have them in for additional forums or public meetings or whatever that haven't been baked into the cost, how that adds on. And I believe that typically is included in these types of things.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm going somewhere then different where you were headed, but that was what I interpreted. And so we'll make sure that that's included in a little bit more clear in the document.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And actually the Solar Power Working Group and the work with Greenside is a perfect example of that, because it guarantees that they're ready for the communication and they build it into the scope of work.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
And I think that midpoint is kind of a key turning point, because you want to have people have something to respond to. It's hard to do a community forum too early or too late. You might not be quite at the right, they might not have enough to respond to, or it might be so far along that input is going to be harder to integrate, so.
Right.
Laurel?
And what we're talking about now is somewhat different from the piece that we were talking about with policy 206, correct? Am I getting this correct, that part is thinking like, what are the big things that we want to be priorities? And what you're talking about, Peter, and you're talking about now are having taken those and having taken their data, how the proposal is coming together. Am I understanding that correctly?
The proposal for
the ultimate, we will, we won't.
the finished product.
Right. Okay.
I don't envision having charrettes with the community over the multitude of ways to draw the lines. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Okay, but then I thought you were going to go through and give guiding principles on priorities for how you would, so I think you have to be careful, because if you're going to say the community's going to go draw it, but this is how you want to see them drawn.
Oh.
So that's not what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking, I want to be very clear. So charrette, I don't want any, this isn't like Dave's anti-gerrymandering map thing where you get to make a map and you get to make a map and you get to make a map and you get to make.
Well, that's kind of what we did with the high school.
Okay, well.
How would you like this? How would you like that? That's what a charrette was.
Sure.
So that's where our thinking
Right, well,
was.
but what was brought before them, right? So I'm thinking about the Coral Street project. So at 30%, right, there was it could be sort of this kind of thing. And you get to play with things. That's a building, right? People are this is a sort of built environment thing because it involves transportation infrastructure and, who lives where. But people are going to look at this and say, okay, well, where do I live? And how might this thing in front of me affect my family or my neighbor or whatever? And their inclusion in the process, they may point something out to a consultant or draw something, right? So I don't want them just making stuff up, because I don't think that most people have that ability. That would be crazy and we wouldn't get anywhere, in my view. But when people's lives are going to be impacted and their kid is going to go from A to B or A to C, having the ability to say, and plan and say, have you thought about this or that, gives voice to them, that can go into, a consultant may be able to do something with that information that this person is not trained to do, right? And I think that in terms of democracy and community input, it can be helpful. It may also be a fair amount of junk. Like,
Right.
But
I mean, I think we have to understand, I think that the key updates, I don't know if it would be similar percentages in the process. Obviously, one of the most important steps is once we get enrollment forecasts. And where are they? So that that can be aligned with attendance boundaries, building capacities. So how much over do we project? Because that's really identifying what's the problem. And we're just, I think that's a key point, whether it's whatever percentage you're talking about. That's, we have to be transparent with all the problem. And then how might we fix it? Obviously, we need guidance on your expectations from the board. I think that's a key tool or framework for us to have a charge to work within. And I think that would really help us. And we need to show that we're aligned to what your expectations are. So any proposal that would come about, we need to have that. And then also, what are our options to phase it so we impact kids the least, right? And there's a variety of things that can happen there. Some have a higher price tag than others. But it isn't a forever. So there's a lot of moving parts to anytime you might need to consider changing a boundary. And let's face it, what we're seeing right now, because of the enrollments, isn't all over the place. We're not suggesting we have to make wholesale changes around the district. That's not what we're seeing, and nor do we want to put on families. So we're not trying to shock people. We just want to make sure we get it right in a few years from now. We didn't miss a projection.
Right. So when other communities have done redistricting and hired firms like this, they've probably had processes like what Peter is talking about. We might be able to look at some other processes that, in other places to see if there's something similar, and maybe the firms that would be, presenting proposals to the district might have previous experience with this kind of community input, which is kind of why I was referring to potentially that, if that's something we want, that maybe it should be in the RFP.
yeah, that's what I think. And based on I'm just thinking about the proposals we got for the solar power working group. They had different ideas. I mean, good firms who are experiencing this thing, if you put it in there, they're going to say, oh, we've done this, and they might give you a work example, right? And if none of them have, and that's what we get, then I guess we won't do it. I mean, I'm not so wed to the idea that like we insist it, but if we put it out there, their experience and creativity can inform what we do. And if it won't work, it won't work, right? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Just even preparing for this discussion and our prior discussion on this, we've seen school districts that have done some different things than we've done and have seen. So I think even just conversations are going to help us identify. Obviously, we went through the school day change, the referendum.
Oh, goodness.
We've done a tremendous amount of outreach through really tough decisions. And we expect to take that same level of care to this process. Good. So maybe not go knocking on doors first. But
I don't mean to imply that there's going to be canvassing.
But I think that we have to take care of what we're doing to our families, because this is, it's important to share everything we know along the way here. So I commit that to you.
Okay, gotcha. So would it be the case that like, for example, would facilities and grounds look at the RFPs when they come in and, rank them, and then, or would they just the board would be completely eliminated, shut out of that process? And the reason I'm asking is because I've worked on other projects where RFPs were reviewed, and it's really helpful when everybody looks at them independently and then comes in the room and ranks them, and you can just add up the numbers. And the reason that that might be applicable here is because the board members are responsible to the community, whereas the administration is not as much directly. And so I'm just thinking if, you know, in terms of responsibility and
I beg to
who
differ on
gets,
who's
you know,
responsible.
who gets blamed
I mean-
for what, then at least there could be some, you know, community members could communicate with the board, well, this doesn't make any sense because A, B, C, whatever, but it just seems like because there's a direct link from the board who are elected by the families, that there could be some kind of communication there because it's a different lens than the administrative lens.
If it's your role and you want to do it, then make your motion and do it. You can do the whole thing then. I mean, I don't think it's the board's role to do the proposal for any changes if we ever had them, but if you want to do that, you can.
So you
take
don't think the
5
board
votes.
should read the RFPs?
I don't think it's your role
To read the
to go
RFPs?
through the RFPs. I don't.
Do you mean,
You mean the
clarification?
I
responses
know
to
it's just an
propose-
example I was thinking of.
I just have
Yeah.
a clarification,
You
so.
can. I'm not telling you
Well-
you can't, but I don't think it's your role.
No,
That's
it's
my
helpful to
opinion.
know that you don't think we should read the RFPs, that, I wanted to know that.
So I just have a clarifying question. Is it, Bob, are you?
You can
are you
have, I mean, if you want to read them and have access to them, but I don't think it's your role to make that recommendation.
So
who we
are
bring on.
are you suggesting that a board member or board members should not be privy to read the proposals that are submitted to this request for proposals?
I don't have a problem with anybody looking at any proposals. I don't think it's the board's role to make the proposal of who we need. to
Who we
help
would
us.
hire?
Yeah.
Okay. And you would prefer that that be purely an administrative decision and not have a board member who would vote on that final, on that final award? That's
The
what.
board would have to approve a contract. There's
Right,
no
we're gonna
doubt.
have to approve a contract one way or another, or we're gonna shoot it down, right? That's what we have.
But that would be the administration choosing and then the board voting yes or no, which is different than like what Peter and I have done in the COG many times, which is the elected officials read the proposals, rank them, and then, you know, and it's a combination of staff and elected officials.
It is, and I'm just wondering if there might be a compromise to this.
And I also did it on the Parks and Rec master plan. We hired a consulting firm.
Have
from
any of
that
you ever led
committee.
any change in attendance area? Have any of you ever done this?
I've never done those either, yeah, but it worked really well, actually.
So could I, when I had suggested at the Facilities and Grounds meeting, or at least raised the question of whether there should be a board member or perhaps the Facilities and Ground Committee members to participate in reviewing the proposals, but at first, I don't think I articulated very clearly why I was thinking about, that it felt important to me in some way, and reflecting on it afterwards, and I thought about some of the various proposals processes that we've gone through. For example, when we hired Massaro as a construction management firm, in that case, it was the CAC for facilities and the board members who were liaisons to that, and I think any board members who wanted to sit in could have sat in. And each of the firms that was providing a proposal came and did a very formal kind of presentation, and I think, if I remember correctly, Ed Poppert kind of asked the questions, and then they gave their presentation, and people could ask questions. And then we did the process like Gretchen talked about, where privately keeping our own scores and then, sharing at the end.
Same for Memorial Field.
Very same process. What I felt like coming out of having sat through all of the proposals for the construction management firm, it wasn't that I needed to choose the construction management firm. And I think when we came through that, after having listened to the different firms, we were all on the same page. It wasn't really particularly controversial, which to choose. But what I really took away from having just been sitting there really completely silently the entire time was I just had a much better understanding of what the potential array of services was, what a construction management firm does, and sort of like what to expect going forward through the next couple years of working with them in terms of, and this is not necessarily a couple years, but just the sort of the flow of what we were to expect going forward and what they would be bringing us. Yeah, I just had a much better sense of like the scope of what we were, asking for in a contract and what we might expect in a contract.
I had the same experience.
And it was more, yeah, so it's not necessarily that so I guess my suggestion is less in terms of, it has nothing to do with thinking that we would necessarily, I have very little expectation that we would have any disagreement on terms of who's the best suited firm. Or that, my opinion would be better or different in any way than anyone else from the administration. More that, I felt that having gone through these previous processes, that I just had an understanding coming out of them that was much more thorough, going into the rest of the process.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Carlene.
Okay, thank you. In response to you though, would you feel better, just say that if Randy and Bob chose the person, the company, and they come and present to us everything that you felt, to understand the process, would that help? Is that...
Oh, that firm?
Yes, from that firm. Because since it was kind of unanimous anyway, you said as the board members sat down and listened to all the proposal, wouldn't it be almost the same thing if they were the chosen ones, that they would come to present to us what they would do, so that we would have a better understanding of what's going on?
I would think that would be
without
helpful.
having to listen to all of them.
Actually, the opposite happened with the CAC for Facilities and Memorial Field Architects. So Ed Poprick had wanted one architect, and then the CAC members wanted a different architect, and there was a lot of discussion. So in other words, administration wanted one, but the CAC members, not the board members, it was CAC members, wanted a different one. And it ended up being that it was all the members except for Ed. And so the opposite happened. Does that make sense, what I just said? Okay.
And the more people, I mean, if you want, I don't know how many board members you're considering, but I think you need to make a motion and tell us, the more that I get involved, the slower the process will be. And
I think it's still the same meeting, because if we're sitting there silently.
Is it a votable or ex officio? Could be an ex officio.
It really
It's
does.
to observe.
So,
An observer.
one thing that doesn't matter is if there's more than one, the solicitor has told me that it will have to be advertised as a public meeting. I'm not criticizing, I'm giving you all of the information.
Yeah, that's helpful to know.
I'm sorry?
I thought it's normally more than 4, but he said more than 1.
In this case, because there would be board member input, and and quite honestly, I doubt that it would be more than, 2.
Been committee or something.
But, I honestly think that I don't think that Bob and I, except for an architect and the construction management firm, which were major processes and major expenses of the district, there's not a practice of board involvement in this type of a situation. So that's why we're asking for direction.
So, Matt, I don't, while I'm maybe sometimes an obsessive nerd and would love to be like, oh, and what are these people saying? What are these people saying? I want to ask them a question. I don't feel like, I don't feel personally as if I need to be there, nor do I think that there is a level of accountability missing in this process that mandates that I or any board member be there. So let me just make that clear, because, Bob, I don't want to be stepping on toes, and I don't want to be trying to throw people, any of us, into stepping on your toes. I think that the place to make sure that for us as a board are getting what we want out of this is to make sure that the request for proposals includes the things that we think are really important, so that when Randy and Bob and company evaluate the firms, that they do that, and then that the weighting of criteria is the weighting of the criteria that represent what we think. Right now it's 50, 45, and 5. And I don't know that we're going to get through this evening what that ought to be. But if we can establish, right, it's price, the previous work, and then here's the actual proposal, is the thing that Ms. Zidney drew attention to. On page 13, I think, right? So, the criteria are clear for what should be in the proposal at this time. They're at the end. In the Facilities and Grounds Committee and this evening, we have discussed a couple of things like demographic characteristics, et cetera, that could be in there, right? And they're at the front of the memo, thank you. And then, these things that would be about community engagement process or something like that. And there haven't been other, actually, this evening, substantive things to put in there, nor changes to the weighting of the criteria. And I know I'm talking a lot and I want to stop. Are there things that are missing right now from the RFP? Because I'm not going to make a motion to include a board member. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Just to answer your question, I am comfortable with the RFP as written. I feel like that is our place to give voice to whatever we prioritize, relatively speaking. Aside from the participation in the policy, whatever we, add to the policy in terms about attendance areas, about what we think are priorities. There's something else I wanted to say. My one observation is that the pool of groups that actually do this, that are going to submit replies, is probably going to be rather small. And I do share a lot of my fellow board members' concerns about always adhering to good process, but I think practically speaking, in a functional sense, there will be limited choices of who we have to pick from, very likely. This is not like an architect. There's probably a narrow number of groups that do this, and the likelihood of one standing well above the rest seems pretty likely. So I am quite comfortable with things as they are. That's my one perspective. So if you're asking about, I don't need to insist upon board participation.
Laura?
My lens is that fairly shortly after I joined the board, we actually got a recommendation from administration that we'd had an RFP and that none of the groups that had responded worked well. And, at that time I was a new board member. It's like, okay, if you say none of them work well, fine. Some years later, I went and actually looked at the proposals and realized there were a bunch of questions there, including, for instance, they'd been rejected because of price or things like this, that might have been things that actually some board participation might have said, well, actually, we've learned a lot from this. We're hearing this, and so I do think that there is a place for board members. Hopefully, everyone agrees, but it's possible there are times when there really are some differences. Is it worth paying more for this or less for this, or how, those various things. To me, it's hard to know what we don't know. So I do think it is important for board representatives. I would probably suggest, especially because of what you shared about the advertising, that it would probably be the Facilities Committee, or maybe the Finance Committee, one of those two committees, that would be the logical people to look at that.
It does sound like, so if legally it would need to be an open meeting, but the intent here is to, that the proposals would be proprietary, then that would change the nature of the proprietary information aspect of it. Right?
Excuse me, did you say if more than one, so we could have one board member without it being advertised?
That's what Dr. Eder told me, yes.
Okay, so I would be fine with that too. I just think that lens is valuable. I agree with Laurel.
Deb?
I'm perfectly comfortable without board representation. I guess I'm not opposed to it if that's what everybody else wants, but I'm perfectly comfortable letting administration handle it. I found a couple of typos in the RFP. I will just email them to you.
I appreciate that.
2000.
And then I just was wondering, Bob, if you had a suggested timeline for when we should have the revision to policy 206 done? Because I don't see that being done before the RFP goes out.
Yeah.
But it clearly needs to be done before you do anything with the enrollment data.
Yeah, I agree that there's, so, if, if we were to have some type of update prior to fall of '23, then obviously, I think sometime this spring, you'd want to take a look at that policy, because when you look at the time frame, if we're fortunate to have some help with the process, then sometime this spring, I think would be ideal before. And the reality is, if you don't do something before May, you're not going to, if you want to engage the community.
It needs to be on the next agenda.
May's not the time
Exactly.
to do that.
But it needs to go through the policy committee first,
Correct.
and then it needs to come here as an information discussion item, and then it comes, so it takes time to get through our process, so we need to
Yes,
get.
but we just had communications this month, so policy is coming up, so.
I do think the community would probably show up once they see what the enrollment projections show.
Yeah.
And, what are the chances their children could be potentially impacted. That's when I think people would want to come out and see what that shows.
Thanks.
Could I circle back to what Peter had asked about demographic, do we want to include a line regarding the demographic data? Because I think what you're talking about is, when you say they would analyze data, including here where it says student demographics, are you thinking about that needs to be more specific?
Well, you mean from the recommendation paragraph?
Objectives paragraph.
The objectives paragraph, hold on.
You're in the RFP, Amber, correct? Okay.
Oh, on what page?
I'm on
sorry.
page 11.
Okay, hold on here, put delivery, possession. In which,
So it says, this review will analyze data including but not limited to school facility utilization and capacity, student demographics, school boundaries, transportation patterns and distances, geographic proximity and features, instructional programs, and financial and administrative efficiency.
well, I think that what I'm actually, so I misspoke using the word demographic because it's located here. In the facilities committee, their word, if I remember correctly, we had a sort of discussion about sort of equity impacts, right? And so what those are, and there may be modes of analysis, right, that they might be able to do using, I don't know, heat mapping or something. I'm just sort of talking. But using the GIS, right, to sort of show us things, but if they're not baked into the criteria through the policy, then like sort of formally, we can't use it as any sort of decision-making at this point. But if we ask them to look at it while we're doing that revision, we can at least see it, even if it doesn't impact directly our decision-making process. I don't know if that made sense.
Thinking about like socioeconomic data as part of student demographics, do we want to state that specifically? Because right now we have, certain schools that are Title I schools, some schools are Title
Why
I.
wouldn't that be a discussion for the policy update?
Well, I guess my question is, does it need?
I don't think you need to get into that tonight.
No, but it might be the question of whether the firm has the skills or not to do that, right? When we talk about student demographics, is that something that they are
So if they're
used to
using
analyzing?
census data, they're just gonna be able to go in and find all kinds of stuff. Like, and any firm that I think that has, of the GIS capability, like, that I'm thinking of, like, if they have half the ability, they're gonna be able to do that.
So it seems like it probably is well enough covered with the term student demographics.
I think it is, yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if I caused any confusion.
No, I think
by
that was.
saying that earlier.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
Then do we want the communication piece to be, the idea of having some kind of community forum be something that we expect from them or not?
I think experience with community and engagement is a good add.
Okay.
And again, the less specific we are, the more information we're going to gather, or we're going to have the opportunity to gather, and that will also help us to develop our own planning process.
That makes sense. So just experience with community engagement as a.
Right, I can add
a
that.
point
I will
somewhere
definitely
in
add
there
that.
where it
And I
fits.
will add the phrase GIS.
Great.
To underscore, to me, it's inherent from what not that I've spent oodles of time doing this, but it's inherent with the term student demographics. But we can add that as well. I have no problem with that.
Okay. I see that it is on page 1, GIS mapping. Or of the, that's of the memo, not the
Yep.
RFP. Yeah.
Right.
Yes, Laura?
So would you, I guess I would like to make a motion that in addition to being the district personnel and agents, one board member selected by the president, which is how we've done things before. I'm asking this and then I'll frame the motion formally. For things like interview processes, we've usually had the board president be the person who selects the person.
Or dependent, yeah.
Or
sometimes
talks
we-
with people and comes up with however it is done. So what I'm thinking of is a motion to add and a board member to that list of district personnel, agents, and there was one other word. Is that the type of thing you were, Dr. O'Donnell, when you said you'd want board direction, is that the type of thing you were saying that you would
Yeah,
want to have us
if we're going to
formally
have
endorse?
board members, who are they, how many in
Well, I'm
their
thinking-
role?
I'm thinking one based on what Dr. Eder advised, and that's why I was thinking that would be, that it would make sense for the board president to be the one to select that, because I don't know who the heck else would. And I'm not ready at this
I
point.
wasn't sure if that would need, the question I was trying to ask before, which I don't know if it was, I think may have been misunderstood, was I'm trying to find it right now in the RFP, where the piece about proprietary information, where it says that this will be limited to agents of the district. I don't know, my question had been originally, doesn't that cover board members as agents of the district?
I would think it should, and just thinking about things that we just read for the consultant firms, those were all proprietary information, and so we were not to talk, you know, I mean, there were parts of those that may have been in the public record, but then any time that there was something that is marked proprietary, not for the, I'm not going to talk about it, you know, I would just assume that that would be legally binding.
I would agree that if you want a board member, the board member could be included as an agent as listed in, so it's not necessarily needed for the RFP review document, the RFP document, but it would be more important for understanding what our process is going to, who and what our process is going to include going forward.
I mean, I think in the past, my recollection was that we just sort of went around the table and sort of agreed, but what I was hearing was that there was a desire for it to be more formal than that.
That's what I was hearing, yeah.
If you're going to poll you right now and you want to use that, that's fine too. We'll use that. That's direction from the board. I just would like to know what's the role of the person or people that you're telling us we're going to include in the interviews and selection to propose to the board. We have a policy on roles, and taking a hard look at that really has a role for board members to update policies, and we have to implement that as administrators. And that's what I want to do. So it's 10:20 p.m. and if you want to give us direction, just give us direction. I don't care if it's polling or whatnot. I don't really have time to waste, and I feel like we're spinning our wheels.
Yes. I've not spoken too much about this yet. I am inclined, when I think about decisions like this, to release it to the administration to evaluate the proposals and because they have to recognize how this fits into our system. And they live in that system every day. We don't. So I'm inclined to defer to them. At the same time, I believe in the importance of having as much opportunity to at least gather information and to understand these processes as we can possibly muster, even if it comes down to one person sitting in. And not in an ex officio way, not in a voting way, but as someone who's just simply learning from the process. Somebody who sits on the Facilities and Grounds Committee, let's say, or perhaps even the chair of the Facilities and Grounds Committee, but as determined by the board president. But I think in terms of moving this along, I think it's fair to say there could be representation on the part of one board member who's an observer in the process and can inform the rest of us. But in terms of actually making a decision, I'd release it to the administration. That's how it comes down to it.
I mean, I don't think I'd want to be the board member sitting in on it because I don't particularly enjoy sitting in on meetings where I've already been told I was not welcome, so, I wouldn't be the one to volunteer, so.
I didn't say you weren't.
It's the last
I've done that, I did that at the Parks Master Plan meeting.
But if I did not feel welcome, I was told it wasn't my role, I'm just saying I'd rather drop it than push forward because I think we're gonna end up being really uncomfortable, so. That's where I am.
I wouldn't be unprofessional, Amber.
I know, and I've never been made to
disagreeing with you
feel unwelcome
on your role. Well,
anywhere.
I feel
I'm
like
just
that's
saying that
what
I
you just
think
said.
that I would feel, I'm saying that at this point I wouldn't, it has been made clear enough that it's not desired, that I would probably
I'm
not
just
feel.
telling, we will absolutely follow through with professionalism
I
and
know.
care if you tell us you want one or all of the board here, and we want to move it forward. And so we will do that. And if I've ever been discourteous
You have never,
with anyone
absolutely
sitting in
never.
on meetings,
Never.
Is there going to be a motion?
Well, I just have a quick question, though. With the board member that's going to be silent, that's going to be observing and then report to us, isn't it the same thing, the role that Randy and Rob is going to do when they get and report to us? I mean, I'm not sure what the board member is going to do.
It's
If
just a
they're both-
different lens. It's a different lens.
and if there's a board member in there, they're going to be
I just-
communicative with us. We've never not spoken with a board member involved in anything with us.
Yeah, I thought you were saying that when you sat in with Massaro, you didn't talk to them, but there might be things then that in the follow-up, you share with the administrators about your observations or a question you had. I thought you were saying you just didn't.
I didn't speak during the interview process.
Right, but you did give feedback to the administrators.
Yeah,
as
when we
part
were
of the
doing like
discussion.
the follow-up discussion.
And it may well be, the input is, hey, we all agree, we're going.
Can I make a suggestion? So if we don't require, if Bob is comfortable without having a formal vote, can we just go around the table then and say whether we
Yes,
want
we
it
can
or
go
not
around.
want it,
Yeah.
so that we can move on? I'm sorry, is that okay?
Yep, totally okay with
All right, thank you.
Wait.
So what's the motion?
Use
So yes
use
means you
some
want
verbal.
a single board member, and no
Yes.
means you're fine with nothing. Is that agreed that that's the dichotomy that we're addressing?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like a board member.
And one observing board member.
Me too, and I would volunteer.
I don't need a board member.
No.
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 An observing board member is fine. But that's a 4-4, and so the motion would, so that's not clear direction.
That's right.
So,
I'm comfortable working out with Amy and Amber, and we'll come up with something and include somebody. This isn't a big
And
deal.
we don't necessarily need a decision tonight, but you spend a lot of time and energy, and so in the effort of progress, but if I would ask, just for clarity and to help ensure that I haven't missed anything, if there's anything that anybody believes needs in here or any edits, just to help aid the process, since you've found them already, please send me an email or reach out to me.
On the last page, there's a 21 that needs to be a 22.
Okay, thank you. But other than that, yes. So we'll be back next week, I'm sorry, next meeting, excuse me, for an approval.
I want to say same time next week, but that doesn't quite fit, right?
It does not, same time next meeting.
That's, hopefully
Okay.
a little earlier in the meeting, but we'll see.
All right. Okay. So moving on to committee
Thanks.
reports.
Thanks, Randy.
Finance and Audit Committee, Deb?
The Finance and Audit Committee met on January 12th. We elected me as the chairperson. We talked about the Perkins Compliance Policy and Procedure Manual that we approved tonight. There was a bit of budget development, and all that information is attached to the agenda, so you can see it there. And there was an update on the solar power purchase agreement. And again, that information is available in the minutes in the agenda. That's it. Thanks.
Great. Peter, the Facilities and Grounds Committee?
Yeah, I'm trying to find my agenda for the Facilities and Grounds Committee here, and will you come back to me, please?
Sure. Laurel, Communications?
I had felt that the minutes pretty much summed everything up. The thing that I would draw people's attention to, and I don't have it up here, is the dates, and Lynn had sent them around for the upcoming board community coffees. The next one, I believe, is the first one is the 25th in the morning, is that correct?
Yes, they're listed. If you go look under upcoming meetings, they're all listed.
Thank you, I had gotten off of that page.
And we just need to hear if anyone had outstanding conflicts.
Right. I assume since they were in here, you hadn't, and we're good to go. But we did talk about that, and we talked about some ideas of just increasing in general our engagement and trying to understand what would work for all of us, and we'll be coming back to that.
Oh, we also did talk briefly about charging the Communications Committee with monitoring
and policy,
government advocacy work, and that there was some conversation there that being they meet alternatively and policy also has a role, perhaps a dual charge to both committees, just so that if something urgent came up, that policy could address it as well. So we could bring that up at the next policy committee meeting and tackle that there.
Facilities and Grounds, thank you for letting me come back. So we met on the 26th. I was elected as the chair. We had an update on the sustainability and physical plant from Mike Fisher. That was great. Then we had discussion about deferred maintenance project for generator capacity. We talked a fair bit about the South Track sound study, that neighborhood, what the thresholds are, et cetera, et cetera. And then we had a discussion, much like tonight, about the attendance area analysis. We covered all of that. And then a discussion about difficulties with that traffic light at the high school, right there. The left turns coming out of Delta, the parking lot that comes into Delta before that. So, and some possibilities for how that might be approached with the State College Borough in the future, but there were no decisions about any of it.
Okay. Yeah, so you can see there we have the board conversations with the community. And with that, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.